No one in Penmere House feared the dead until his solicitor ordered a chair set for the Duke of Harrow-mere. England, 1817, had given London many solemn rooms, but that morning the drawing-room in Lord Penmere's Mayfair house seemed to hold its breath beneath the black drapery and polished mirrors. The late lord had been buried 3 days before, and every person who had ever smiled at his table now waited to learn what grief was worth in land, silver, income, and influence. Miss Beatrice Ellowes stood near the far window, where the winter light made the old mend in her glove visible if anyone cared to look closely. No one did. That had long been one of Beatrice's few advantages. People spoke freely in front of a woman they had decided was unimportant. They handed her letters to copy, accounts to total, shawls to fetch, invalid tempers to soothe, and confidences to overhear by accident. Then they forgot she had ears, memory, and a mind trained by years of being useful without being valued. She was 26, neither young enough to be displayed nor rich enough to be pursued. Her gown was black for mourning, though it had first been black for economy. At the left wrist, beneath the repaired glove, her fingers curled around a small brass key. The key had belonged to her mother. It was not pretty. It had no jewel, no ribbon, no crest. Its bow was worn smooth from another woman's thumb, and its teeth were uneven enough to catch on the lining of Beatrice's reticule. Lord Penmere had once seen it in her hand and gone strangely pale. "Keep that, child," he had said, in one of his rare moments of softness. "There may come a day when a room needs to become honest." At the time, Beatrice had been 15 and had not understood. 10 years later, she understood only that honest rooms were rare in aristocratic houses. Behind her, Lady Honoria Branton arranged herself upon the sofa as if mourning had been invented to flatter her profile. She was still handsome, with silver-threaded dark hair, a narrow waist, and the kind of smile that could cut without showing teeth. She was Lord Penmere's niece by marriage, though she had spent the past week speaking as if blood, grief, and authority all belonged to her by natural law. Beside her, Miss Celeste Branton turned a jet bracelet around her wrist and watched Beatrice in the glass. Celeste was 19, fair, and conscious of the exact value of being fair at 19. Sir Felix Branton stood by the mantel, one hand tucked inside his waistcoat, already practicing the stillness of a man who expected soon to own the room. Miss Ellowes, Lady Honoria said, not loudly, because she never needed volume to make a wound. "You need not remain by the window like a servant awaiting instructions. Come nearer. It will look odd if Mr. Pritchard arrives and finds you hiding behind the curtains." Beatrice released the key and turned. "I was not hiding, Lady Honoria." Celeste gave a soft laugh. "No, of course you weren't. Beatrice never hides. She simply appears wherever no one has thought to look." Sir Felix smiled into the fire. A useful gift in a dependent relation. The word settled with delicate cruelty. A dependent relation. Not a daughter of the house, though her mother had once been received in drawing-rooms finer than this one. Not a servant, because her birth was too inconveniently gentle for wages. Not a guest, because guests could leave. Beatrice crossed the carpet and chose a chair with a straight back near the side table. She did not take the low stool Lady Honoria's glance had indicated. It was a small rebellion, so small that only Lady Honoria noticed. That made it worth doing. "You are very composed this morning," Lady Honoria observed. "I hope you have not allowed yourself expectations." "Expectations are expensive," Beatrice said. "I have learned thrift." Celeste's bracelet stilled. Sir Felix looked over his shoulder, amused now, but not kindly. "Then you will manage beautifully after today. My uncle was charitable, but sentiment has ended. Houses require order. So do households." Beatrice folded her hands. The brass key pressed a secret shape into her palm. "I have never objected to order." "No," Sir Felix said. "Only to being placed within it." Lady Honoria sighed with practiced sorrow. "Felix, don't tease her. This is an uncomfortable day for everyone. Beatrice has lived under Lord Penmere's roof for many years. Naturally, she may feel uncertain." "I'm not teasing," Sir Felix replied. "I'm preparing her. It is kinder than letting her imagine she has some permanent claim upon Penmere House." Beatrice looked at him then. She had learned, over the years, that a direct gaze unsettled those who preferred her lowered eyes. I have made no claim. Good, he said. Then we understand one another. They did not. But Beatrice had survived too long in that house to spend strength correcting a man who mistook possession for understanding. A footman entered with the silent care of a servant carrying news that might alter his own employment. He looked first to Lady Honoria, then to Sir Felix, and only after that to Beatrice. Mr. Elias Pritchard has arrived, my lady. Lady Honoria straightened. Celeste sat taller. Sir Felix's fingers tightened briefly on the mantle. That small movement told Beatrice more than his smile had. He was not as certain as he wished to appear. Show him in, Lady Honoria said. And see that the library fire is kept high. We shall need the room decent for business. The drawing room, my lady, the footman said, and flushed at once. Mr. Pritchard requested the drawing room. Sir Felix turned fully. Requested. The footman swallowed. Yes, sir. Lady Honoria's smile cooled. How particular of him. When Mr. Pritchard entered, he brought the smell of cold air and damp wool with him, though his coat had already been taken below. He was a compact man in late middle age, with grey whiskers, careful eyes, and a leather case held close to his side. Solicitors, Beatrice had noticed, often looked less impressive than the damage they could do. He bowed first to Lady Honoria, then to Sir Felix, then, with unexpected precision, to Beatrice. It was not a deep bow. It was not warm. Yet it acknowledged that she existed in the room as herself, not as furniture. Beatrice felt Lady Honoria notice. Mr. Pritchard, Lady Honoria said. We are assembled. I trust this need not be prolonged. The family is fatigued. Grief is often fatiguing, Mr. Pritchard replied. His voice was dry, almost colourless. Business may be more so. Sir Felix gave a short laugh. Then let us begin and be spared both. Mr. Pritchard did not open his case. Instead, he looked toward the circle of chairs arranged before the hearth. One chair remained empty, placed slightly apart from the rest. It was high-backed, carved, and too imposing for the quiet room. Beatrice had thought it an error by a servant anxious to impress the solicitor. Now she saw Mr. Pritchard's gaze rest upon it with intention. We are not yet complete, he said. Lady Honoria's expression did not change, but the pearls at her throat moved with her breath. Not complete? Everyone with a natural interest in my late uncle's affairs is present. Not everyone named in his lordship's final instructions. Celeste leaned forward. Who else could there be? Sir Felix's patience thinned. If some distant cousin intends to make a performance of grief, he may read his portion later. It is not a distant cousin, Mr. Pritchard said. The room seemed to draw inward. Even the clock on the mantel sounded suddenly too loud. Beatrice felt, rather than saw, Sir Felix's confidence shift. It did not collapse. Men like Sir Felix rarely collapsed in public. It sharpened. Then who? He asked. Mr. Pritchard placed his leather case upon the table but kept one gloved hand resting on the clasp. His Grace, Alistair Veyne, Duke of Harrow-mere. Celeste's lips parted. Lady Honoria went very still. Sir Felix stared as if the solicitor had spoken a foreign language at an English funeral. Beatrice did not move, yet the key in her palm suddenly felt colder. Harrow-mere. Even she, who had not been taken to a proper ball in 2 seasons, knew that name. London did not speak of the Duke of Harrow-mere with affection. It lowered its voice. He was the man mothers warned their daughters not to offend and ambitious fathers pretended not to court too eagerly. He was said to be severe, unforgiving, and rich enough to ignore every drawing room that tried to judge him. Some called him proud. Some called him ruined by old family bitterness. A few, when they thought no one important could hear, called him monstrous. Beatrice had never seen him. Yet at the sound of his name, every person who had dismissed her all morning forgot to look bored. That interested her. Fear revealed hierarchy more honestly than etiquette ever did. Lady Honoria recovered first. Mr. Pritchard, there must be some mistake. His Grace was not intimate with Lord Penmere. No mistake. Then his connection to this household is what, precisely? That, said Mr. Pritchard, is among the matters to be read. Sir Felix took one step from the mantel. "Read it now." The solicitor looked at him mildly. "I cannot." "You cannot." "I cannot begin until all required parties are present." Celeste gave a nervous little laugh. "But surely a duke needn't be inconvenienced by our family paperwork." Mr. Pritchard's eyes flicked to her. His Grace did not describe it as inconvenience when he confirmed attendance. Beatrice heard the small word inside the sentence. Confirmed. The Duke knew. The late Lord Penmere had sent for him, and he had agreed to come. Why? The question opened in her mind like a door she had not known was there. Lady Honoria's hand closed around her handkerchief. Sir Felix looked at the empty chair as if it had insulted him. For the first time that morning, Beatrice was not the most unwanted presence in the room. She lowered her eyes before anyone could see the thought pass through them. The brass key lay hidden in her glove, warming again against her skin. Somewhere in the house, a door shut below stairs. Wheels sounded faintly on the street beyond the windows, then slowed before Penmere House. No one spoke. The silence became so complete that Beatrice heard Celeste stop turning her bracelet. Mr. Pritchard looked toward the door. "We can't begin until His Grace arrives," he said. The carriage wheel stopped outside Penmere House, and every person in the drawing-room seemed to listen with a different kind of fear. Lady Honoria listened like a hostess insulted by an unexpected guest. Sir Felix listened like a man hearing a lock turn on property he had already counted. Celeste listened with bright curiosity, as if scandal had arrived in a dark coat and might bow to her first. Beatrice listened because the name Harrow-mere had changed the temperature of the room. It was not merely a duke's name. It was a warning passed through drawing rooms by women who adored danger as long as it belonged to someone else. Mr. Pritchard did not move toward the door. He remained beside the table, one hand still upon his leather case, as if the papers inside it carried more authority than anyone present. A footman entered a moment later, pale with effortful composure. "His Grace's carriage has arrived, sir." Sir Felix's mouth tightened. "Then show him in and be done with all this theatre." "His Grace requests that the reading begin," the footman said. The room went still again. Lady Honoria blinked. "Requests?" "He has been delayed at the entrance by a messenger from Lincoln's Inn, my lady. He says Mr. Pritchard is to proceed, and he will join when the matter requires him." It was an extraordinary thing, delivered in a servant's careful voice. Beatrice saw what it did to Sir Felix. It made him uncertain whether he had been slighted or studied. Mr. Pritchard gave the smallest nod. "Very well. His Grace has provided written permission for me to begin in his absence if necessary." He opened his case at last. The clasp clicked like a judgment. Lady Honoria sat back, her face arranged into wounded patience. "Then let us begin." Lord Penmere was fond of legal flourishes in life. It appears he has preserved the habit after death. Mr. Pritchard drew out a sealed packet, broke the black wax, and unfolded the will with a precision that made every rustle sound important. Beatrice sat near the side table, her chair neither fully included in the family circle nor entirely excluded from it. That placement had been chosen before the Duke's name unsettled the room. Now it looked less like dismissal and more like a mistake no one could correct without admitting intention. "The last will and testament of Horace Edmund Vale, Baron Penmere," Mr. Pritchard began, and the formal words entered the room with the weight of stone. For several minutes, nothing unexpected occurred. Small bequests were named. A silver tea service to Lady Honoria. 2 hunting prints to Sir Felix. A pearl comb and a set of garnets to Miss Celeste Branton. Servants were remembered with sums large enough to seem benevolent and small enough not to trouble the inheritance. Beatrice listened without surprise. She had expected nothing. Expecting nothing had become a discipline, and she had practiced it until disappointment could not easily catch her unguarded. Sir Felix's confidence returned by inches. He stood with his chin slightly raised, receiving each line as confirmation that the house, the land, the income, and the influence were flowing toward him by natural gravity. Then Mr. Pritchard turned a page. "To my ward by affection, though not by formal guardianship, Miss Beatrice Ellowes, daughter of the late Eleanor Ellowes, I leave the use and enjoyment of Northgate Lodge, with its furnishings, garden rights, and annual maintenance provision, to be held separate from the Penmere household and not subject to the management of Sir Felix Branton. Celeste made a sound too small to be called a gasp. Lady Honoria's hand closed over her handkerchief. Sir Felix stared. Beatrice did not move. Northgate Lodge was not grand. It stood 3 miles beyond the Penmere estate in Kent, a modest stone house with a walled garden and a view of pastureland. Beatrice had visited once as a child, before her mother died. She remembered lavender near the door, dust in the window panes, and her mother laughing for reasons Beatrice was too young to understand. "This is absurd," Sir Felix said. Mr. Pritchard looked up. "I have only begun. Northgate is attached to the estate. Its use may be assigned to a dependent relation. To Miss Ellowes," Mr. Pritchard said. The correction was quiet. It landed hard. Beatrice lowered her eyes because she felt the room turn toward her, and she needed one breath in which no one could read her face. Her hand found the brass key beneath the glove. Not hope. Not yet. Hope was dangerous in rooms full of people who profited from its destruction. Mr. Pritchard continued. "In addition, I direct that the sum of £12,000, presently held in disputed reserve within the Penmere accounts, be placed under protected settlement for Miss Ellowes, pending the conditions set forth below." Lady Honoria rose halfway from the sofa. "Disputed reserve? Please be seated, Lady Honoria. I will not be seated while my uncle's private confusion is used to insult this family." Mr. Pritchard folded the edge of the paper down with one finger. His lordship was of sound mind when he signed this instrument. His physician, steward, and 2 witnesses have attested as much. Sir Felix's expression changed. It became pleasant. That was worse. "What conditions?" he asked. Beatrice looked at him then. He did not look back. He was watching the will as if it were an opponent. Mr. Pritchard read on. "The settlement shall be secured for Miss Ellowes if, within 3 months of this reading, she enters into a formal and publicly acknowledged courtship with Alistair Veyne, Duke of Harrow-mere, and if both parties, without coercion, concealment, threat, or improper persuasion, agree thereafter to the drafting of a marriage settlement." The room did not erupt. It froze first. Shock was more powerful than noise. Beatrice heard Celeste stop breathing for 1 sharp second. Lady Honoria's face emptied of expression. Sir Felix took a slow step back, as though the words had struck the floor near his feet. Beatrice felt the sentence arrive inside her 1 phrase at a time. Formal courtship. Duke of Harrow-mere. 3 months. Without coercion. Marriage settlement. Her name had been tied to a man she had never met, a man feared by half of London and courted by the other half. And the tying had been done by a dead man who had rarely spoken to her except to correct the household account books or ask after her mother's health in the past tense. Celeste recovered first. "That cannot be real." Mr. Pritchard did not dignify the remark with a glance. Lady Honoria's voice turned soft, which made it far more dangerous. "Mr. Pritchard, you must see the impropriety. Miss Ellowes has no connection to his grace. She has no fortune suitable to his consequence, no rank to recommend her, no beauty sufficient to excuse the presumption." Beatrice's cheeks warmed, but she kept her hands folded. Beauty, when denied in public, became less a quality than a weapon. Lady Honoria had always known how to draw blood without staining her gloves. Sir Felix laughed once. "My uncle must have been entertained by the idea. Harrow-mere would no more court Miss Ellowes than he would court the housemaid." Mr. Pritchard's eyes hardened. "The will specifies courtship only if His Grace agrees. His Grace has been informed of the provision." Sir Felix's laugh died. "Informed?" "Yes." "And what was his answer?" For the first time, Mr. Pritchard hesitated. It was brief, but Beatrice saw it. So did Sir Felix. The solicitor adjusted the paper. His Grace replied that he would attend the reading and hear Miss Ellowes' answer before giving his own. Beatrice's heart gave 1 firm, painful beat. Her answer. Not Lady Honoria's. Not Sir Felix's. Hers. The room had been speaking around her all morning, but the will had placed her voice where none of them could easily remove it. That realization frightened her more than poverty. Poverty was familiar. Choice was not. Lady Honoria turned toward Beatrice, her smile thin as wire. My dear, surely you understand what this means. A gentleman like the Duke of Harrow-mere does not become involved in such arrangements without consequence. You would be exposed to ridicule. People would say you trapped him through an old man's sentiment. People already say many things, Beatrice said. Her voice was calm enough to surprise even herself. Celeste leaned forward. But this is different. They'll laugh in every ballroom in London. Then London will be well occupied. Sir Felix's eyes narrowed. Take care, cousin. She looked at him. I am not your cousin. The words were quiet. The effect was not. Lady Honoria inhaled. Celeste stared as if Beatrice had overturned the tea table. Sir Felix smiled again, but the smile had lost its ease. No. You are not. That is precisely the difficulty. Mr. Pritchard lifted the will. There is more. If any party attempts to force Miss Ellowes' consent, suppress documents relating to her mother's property, discredit her character by false report, or interfere with the Duke's independent judgment, the trustees named herein are empowered to suspend Sir Felix Branton's assumption of certain Penmere revenues until review. The room seemed to tilt. Sir Felix's hand moved toward the mantel, not for support perhaps, but because he needed to touch something he believed was his. Trustees? 3, said Mr. Pritchard. Named in the instrument. Lady Honoria's voice sharpened. This is an attack upon the family. No, Mr. Pritchard said. It is a precaution. Against whom? The solicitor looked down at the page. Against anyone who mistakes Miss Ellowes' dependence for helplessness. Beatrice could not look at him. The sentence had found something inside her that she had kept locked for years. Not gratitude. Not relief. Something more painful. Recognition. Celeste stood, her bracelet trembling at her wrist. I don't understand. Why would Lord Penmere do this for her? No one answered. That was when Beatrice understood that the question had been waiting in the room long before the will was opened. Why her? Why now? Why the Duke? Sir Felix turned at last, and his gaze settled on the small mend in her glove, then on her face. All courtesy left him. What remained was the offended disbelief of a man who had found a closed door where he expected an empty corridor. Well, Miss Ellowes, he said. Will you bind yourself to a beast for a roof and a purse? For one suspended second, Sir Felix's question seemed to hang above the carpet like smoke. No one moved to clear it. Lady Honoria did not rebuke him. Celeste did not hide her eager little smile. Mr. Pritchard looked down at the will as though even a solicitor, trained to survive the indecencies of families, preferred not to witness what the living did when the dead could no longer contradict them. Beatrice sat very still. She had been insulted before. She had been pitied, overlooked, corrected, and discussed as if she were a chair with unfortunate upholstery. Yet this was different. Sir Felix had not merely mocked her poverty. He had placed a price upon her dignity and then invited the room to watch her accept it. A roof and a purse. That was what he believed she was worth. Perhaps he believed every woman without fortune could be reduced to those two things if the room was cruel enough and the silence long enough. Beatrice felt the brass key beneath her glove. Its uneven teeth pressed into her palm until the small discomfort steadied her. She had a sudden memory of her mother's hands closing around that same key. Eleanor Ellowes had been pale by then, too thin for the blue gown she still wore, as if beauty could be kept alive by discipline. Never let them make gratitude into a collar, her mother had whispered once. Beatrice had not understood that either. She understood it now. Lady Honoria tilted her head. My dear, no one expects you to answer immediately. This is a shock. You may be excused if emotion has overcome judgment. It was beautifully done. A rescue that was really another cage. If Beatrice remained silent, they would call her overwhelmed. If she protested, they would call her ungrateful. If she agreed, they would call her bought. Celeste's smile widened. It would be wiser to say no, of course. A woman of sense wouldn't want Harrow-mere. Not unless she had no other hope. Beatrice rose. The movement was not dramatic. Her chair made no sound against the carpet. That quietness forced the others to watch more closely. She drew off her left glove finger by finger, because gloves could hide trembling and she did not wish to be hidden. The small brass key lay across her palm, dull and plain beneath the drawing-room light. Sir Felix looked at it with irritation first, then recognition of some kind he quickly smothered. Lady Honoria's hand tightened around her handkerchief. There it was. Not proof. Not yet. But a crack in the surface. Beatrice placed the key upon the table beside the will. The sound was tiny. It might as well have been a bell. "I believe," she said, "that Sir Felix asked me a question." Mr. Pritchard lifted his head. Lady Honoria said quickly, "He spoke in temper." "We need not dignify it." "No," Beatrice said. "We must. Rooms such as this survive because so many things are not dignified with answers." Sir Felix's nostrils flared. "Take care, Miss Ellowes." She looked at him fully. "I have taken care all my life. That is why I am still standing." Celeste gave a brittle laugh. "Standing beside a key and a will doesn't make you grand." "No," Beatrice said. "Nor does standing beside a mantle make a gentleman." The silence changed shape. Before, it had belonged to shock. Now it belonged to attention. Beatrice could feel every gaze against her black gown, every judgment searching for a weakness in her posture. She had weaknesses. Many. She was afraid of poverty. She was afraid of being turned out. She was afraid of the Duke whose name made even Lady Honoria measure her words. But fear was not the same as surrender. She turned slightly toward Mr. Pritchard. "You said His Grace wished to hear my answer before giving his own." "I did," the solicitor said. "Then he shall have one fit to be repeated." Lady Honoria rose. "Beatrice, this display is unnecessary. It became necessary when my person was weighed aloud against shelter and money." She turned back to the room. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "I will not be inherited. I will not be purchased. And if His Grace is feared, then let him be the first man in this room brave enough to hear a woman answer for herself." No one breathed. The words did not echo. They settled. Celeste's face lost its brightness. Lady Honoria went motionless, her expression caught between disbelief and calculation. Sir Felix stared at Beatrice as if she had broken a law older than Parliament by refusing shame. Mr. Pritchard closed one hand slowly over the edge of the will. Then a sound came from the doorway. Not applause. Not a gasp. Only the soft, measured strike of a walking stick upon polished wood. Every head turned. The footman stood aside with the rigid panic of a servant who had admitted a storm and could not command it to leave. In the doorway stood a tall man in a dark travelling coat, his gloves still on, his hat tucked beneath one arm. He was not handsome in the easy, golden way gentlemen preferred to be admired. His face was severe, with dark hair brushed back from a high brow, a firm mouth, and eyes so steady that they seemed to remove excuses from anyone they touched. A faint scar cut near his right temple, pale against his skin, not disfiguring but impossible to ignore. It gave his stillness a history. His presence did what rank alone could not have done. It made the room remember itself. Lady Honoria dipped into a curtsy too late to make it graceful. Celeste followed in a flutter of black muslin. Sir Felix bowed with stiff reluctance. Mr. Pritchard inclined his head. Beatrice did not move at once. She had imagined the Duke of Harrow-mere as a rumour-made flesh, some cold aristocratic monster with contempt ready in his hand. The man at the door did not look monstrous. He looked worse for her composure. He looked exact. He looked as if every careless word spoken in his hearing had been counted and stored. His gaze rested first on the brass key, and for the smallest instant something passed across his face. Recognition. Pain. Anger. It vanished almost before Beatrice could name it. Then he looked at her. Not at her patched glove lying on the table. Not at her plain black gown. Not at Lady Honoria to ask what version of the story should be believed. At her. "Miss Ellowes," he said. His voice was low, controlled, and unmistakably English in its restraint. "Your answer was heard." Beatrice found the strength to curtsy. "Your Grace." Sir Felix stepped forward. "Your Grace, I must apologize. You have arrived in the midst of a family misunderstanding." The Duke did not look at him. "I heard no misunderstanding." Sir Felix's smile tightened. "Then perhaps you heard only the end of a conversation." "I heard enough to know the beginning was unworthy." Lady Honoria moved in with the smooth courage of a woman accustomed to softening men before they could become dangerous. "Your Grace, grief has unsettled us all. My cousin spoke rashly, and Miss Ellowes, understandably, has been overcome by the unusual nature of Lord Penmere's provisions." The Duke looked at her then. The effect was immediate. Lady Honoria stopped speaking. "Do not mistake composure for being overcome," he said. "It is a common error among those who prefer women silent." Celeste's eyes widened. Mr. Pritchard lowered his gaze, but Beatrice thought she saw the corner of his mouth move. Sir Felix coloured. "I meant no offence." "That is unlikely." The Duke stepped farther into the room. The footman closed the door behind him, and the soft click made retreat feel impossible. "You called me a beast, Sir Felix." Sir Felix forced a laugh. "A figure of speech. And Miss Ellowes purchasable." The room tightened again. Sir Felix looked from the Duke to the will, measuring danger. "I spoke clumsily." "No," the Duke said. "Clumsiness lacks aim." Beatrice should not have felt anything then except alarm. Instead, a strange and fragile warmth moved through her, not because she trusted him, and not because rescue had come wrapped in a ducal title. She felt it because he had named the insult accurately. He had not softened it for comfort. He had not asked her to pretend it had not happened. For years, cruelty in Penmere House had been wrapped in silk until everyone could pretend it was manners. The Duke had cut the silk. Lady Honoria's voice trembled with offence. "Your Grace, surely this cannot be the tone with which you intend to discuss a respectable family's private affairs." "Respectability is not privacy," he said. "Nor is family a license." He turned to Mr. Pritchard. "The private instruction." Sir Felix's head snapped toward the solicitor. "There is no need." "There is every need," the Duke said. Then, finally, he looked back at Beatrice. Something in his gaze lowered the noise inside her. It was not tenderness. It was attention, and attention from such a man felt almost more dangerous. "Miss Ellowes has answered," he said. "The room will now do her the courtesy of hearing itself." Beatrice looked at the brass key lying beside the will, no longer hidden in her glove, no longer pressed secretly into her skin. She had put it in the open, and the room had changed around it. Mr. Pritchard reached into his leather case and drew out a second sealed packet, smaller than the first, its wax dark red against the folded paper. Lady Honoria went pale. Sir Felix took one step forward before the Duke's eyes stopped him. The solicitor broke the seal. The sound was small, crisp, and final. "By instruction of the late Lord Penmere," Mr. Pritchard read, "this memorandum is to be opened upon any sign of coercion, concealment, or interference with the free answer of Miss Beatrice Eleanor Ellowes." Beatrice felt the floor become less certain beneath her feet. Her name. Her full name. Not dependent relation. Not charity. Not burden. Her name, written by a dead man who had known the room would turn cruel. The Duke stood beside the table, silent as judgment, while every face that had looked down upon her began, at last, to look afraid. Mr. Pritchard unfolded the smaller packet with the care of a man opening a wound that had been sealed too long. No one in the drawing-room seemed willing to breathe until the paper lay flat in his hands. Even the Duke of Harrow-mere stood utterly still, his dark gloves resting at his sides, his attention fixed not on Sir Felix's anger or Lady Honoria's pale composure, but on the written words that had waited behind the dead man's seal. Beatrice felt the room gather around her name. It was a strange sensation, not warm, not comforting, but undeniable. For years she had been useful enough to be summoned and insignificant enough to be dismissed. Now every person present seemed to understand that Lord Penmere had left something behind that could not be swept beneath a carpet or softened into family gossip. The solicitor cleared his throat. "My dear Pritchard," he read, and his dry voice altered slightly as he entered the late Lord's phrasing, "if this memorandum has been opened, then someone has already attempted to pressure Miss Beatrice Ellowes before she has been permitted a free answer. I regret to say I expected as much. Lady Honoria made a faint sound. This is grotesque. The Duke did not turn. No one asked your opinion of the dead, Lady Honoria. Her mouth closed. Mr. Pritchard continued. I have reason to believe that property belonging to Eleanor Ellowes, deceased, was never properly recorded among the Penmere papers after her death. I have further reason to believe that my niece by marriage, Lady Honoria Branton, and her son, Sir Felix Branton, may know more of the matter than they have disclosed. Sir Felix stepped forward. That is slander. It's only slander if it isn't true, the Duke said. The words were quiet. They landed like a door bolting. Sir Felix flushed, but he did not answer him. He seemed to understand, perhaps for the first time that morning, that a duke could not be handled as easily as a poor relation. Mr. Pritchard kept reading. The room beneath the east stair was once used by Eleanor Ellowes during her residence at Penmere House. Certain papers, if not already removed, may be found in the cabinet there. The key was given to Eleanor's child. If Beatrice still possesses it, she must not surrender it to any member of this family. Beatrice's hand moved before she could stop it. Her fingers hovered above the brass key on the table, not touching it, only guarding its small, plain shape from the eyes now fixed upon it. Lady Honoria looked at the key as if it had betrayed her by existing. Celeste's face had gone oddly blank. Sir Felix's gaze sharpened with something Beatrice did not like. Not surprise. Calculation. This is outrageous, Lady Honoria said. Eleanor had no property of significance. She came here as a widow in reduced circumstances. My uncle offered shelter out of duty, nothing more. Beatrice turned to her. My mother was never a widow. The correction left her before caution could stop it. Lady Honoria looked at her sharply. Beatrice felt heat rise in her face, but she did not retreat. My father died before I was born. They were betrothed, not married. You have corrected me on that point often enough. Celeste's eyes flickered with satisfaction, as though the old shame had been restored to its shelf. The Duke saw it. His expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to harden. A woman's misfortune is not evidence that her property vanished by nature, he said. Nor does birth outside convenience give relatives permission to steal. Lady Honoria rose fully then, elegant even in outrage. Your Grace, I will not permit you to enter this house and imply criminality because a dead man indulged a sentimental fancy toward a dependent girl. The Duke looked at her for a long moment. You will permit more than you intended this morning. Beatrice should have been afraid of that tone. Everyone else was. Yet what frightened her more was the thought that he might seize the matter entirely, carry it away into masculine authority, and leave her once again an object around which powerful people moved. She reached for the key and closed it in her hand. Your Grace. He turned to her at once. The swiftness of his attention startled her. It was as if, while the others demanded, she had only to speak. Miss Ellowes. Her voice was steady, though the key's edge marked her palm. If there are papers concerning my mother, I wish to see them. But I will not have them taken from this house by anyone before they are witnessed and inventoried. Mr. Pritchard's brows lifted almost imperceptibly. Sir Felix's face tightened. The Duke watched her, and for the first time since entering, something like approval moved through his severity. That is a sound requirement. Lady Honoria laughed softly. How quickly she learns the language of possession. Beatrice turned toward her. No, my lady. I learned the language of loss first. Possession is new. Silence followed. It was not the stunned silence of her earlier answer. It was heavier, because this time no one could pretend she had spoken in shock. The Duke's gaze remained on Lady Honoria. Rank does not turn theft into discretion. Lady Honoria's colour changed. Take care, Your Grace. I am. He glanced at the solicitor. Mr. Pritchard, you will make a written note of Miss Ellowes' request. Nothing in the East Stair Room is to be removed without her presence, your presence, and proper witnesses. Certainly, Your Grace. Sir Felix gave a short, bitter smile. How generous. A duke, a solicitor, and a household paraded through private family rooms because Miss Ellowes has discovered a taste for importance. Beatrice met his eyes. No. Because Lord Penmere discovered a taste for precaution. That was when a faint sound came from the corridor, quickly smothered. A servant had been listening. Of course someone had been listening. In great houses, servants carried truth as silently as trays, and the family pretended not to notice unless truth spilled. The Duke noticed. The staff will be instructed that Miss Ellowes is not to be hindered. Lady Honoria's lips thinned. You speak as though you command here. No, the Duke said. I speak as though I understand what happens when those who command here are left unobserved. Beatrice drew a careful breath. There is another matter. The Duke inclined his head. She forced herself not to look at Lady Honoria. I cannot remain in this house tonight. The sentence surprised the room almost as much as the wool had. Celeste's eyebrows lifted. Sir Felix smiled. A dramatic departure. How suitable. Beatrice ignored him. But I will not leave in a manner that allows anyone to say I fled with your grace, or that I placed myself under your private protection without propriety. For a heartbeat, the Duke said nothing. Then his expression changed in a way so small it might have been missed by anyone less practiced in studying withheld emotion. Respect, perhaps. Or the recognition that she understood the danger of being rescued badly. You are correct. Lady Honoria seized the opening. Then she remains here, where she belongs, until this unpleasant confusion is settled. She does not belong where she has been insulted, coerced, and discussed as property, the Duke said. But Miss Ellowes is also correct that propriety must be guarded. He looked to Mr. Pritchard. Send immediately to Lady Winifred Mallow in Brook Street. She is my late mother's friend, a widow of unblemished reputation, and sufficiently formidable to discourage invention. Mr. Pritchard nodded. I know Lady Winifred. She will come if the matter is properly stated. State it properly. Beatrice felt the first loosened thread of panic inside her. She had said she could not remain, but saying a thing and surviving its consequence were different arts. Penmere House had been a cage, but it had also been a roof. To leave it under the eyes of those who wished her ruined required more courage than speaking had. I will need written terms, she said. The Duke's attention returned to her. Name them. Lady Honoria gave an incredulous breath. Written terms? From a girl who owns nothing. From a lady whose property may have been concealed, the Duke replied. Continue, Miss Ellowes. Beatrice lifted her chin. Lady Winifred's house, not yours. Her carriage, if she allows it. Mr. Pritchard's note confirming I leave under her temporary care. No announcement of an engagement. No claim that I have accepted anything beyond the right to consider what was read. The room listened because he listened. That was the power of him, and the danger. His attention lent weight. His rank made her words harder to dismiss. Granted, he said. Sir Felix laughed under his breath. You bargain bravely for someone with nowhere else to go. The Duke turned on him at last. Apologize. For what? For suggesting necessity removes dignity. Sir Felix's jaw hardened. Your Grace, I don't answer to theatrical commands. Then answer to plain ones. The Duke took one step closer, not threatening, not loud, yet the room recoiled from the distance he removed. Apologize to Miss Ellowes, or I will leave this house and make certain every person of consequence in London knows Lord Penmere's will was met here with coercion before the ink of mourning dried. Sir Felix looked at Lady Honoria. She gave the smallest shake of her head. He swallowed his pride like something bitter. Miss Ellowes, he said, if my words cause discomfort, I regret it. Beatrice looked at him. They did not cause discomfort. They revealed intention. But I accept the regret you are able to offer. Mr. Pritchard bent quickly over a sheet of paper, perhaps to hide his expression. The Duke did not smile. That made his approval more powerful. An hour later, Lady Winifred Mallow's carriage stood before Penmere House, square, dark, and respectable. Beatrice descended the front steps with her reticule, one small trunk to be sent after her, and the brass key once again in her keeping. The Duke did not touch her arm. He walked at a proper distance, near enough to make interference impossible and far enough to make gossip less convenient. At the carriage door, he stopped. "Did they often speak to you so?" The question was quiet. It should have been easy to answer. Yes would expose too much. No would be a lie. Beatrice looked at the black iron step, then at the open carriage waiting to take her somewhere she had not been diminished into habit. "Good day, Your Grace," she said. His eyes held hers for one silent moment. He understood. Lady Winifred's gloved hand reached from within the carriage. Beatrice accepted it and stepped inside. As the carriage pulled away, she did not look back. If she had, she might have seen Celeste standing just inside the drawing room, bending swiftly near the table where the private packet had first been opened. A small folded scrap had fallen half beneath the edge of the carpet. Celeste lifted it before any servant could enter. On it, in a faded feminine hand, was the signature Eleanor Ellowes. Lady Winifred Mallow's house in Brook Street did not try to impress anyone. That, Beatrice discovered by noon the following day, was precisely what made it formidable. It had no gilded excess, no anxious display of porcelain, no portraits arranged to remind visitors of old alliances. Its power lay in Polish, punctual servants, well-banked fires, and a mistress who could silence foolishness by setting down a teacup. Lady Winifred was 60 if she was a day, narrow as a silver paper knife, and dressed in mourning that looked less like grief than command. She had received Beatrice the previous afternoon without fuss, assigned her a chamber overlooking a quiet rear garden, and said only, "My dear, no woman should make life decisions while cold, hungry, or surrounded by people who benefit from her confusion." It was the first practical kindness Beatrice had received in so long that she had almost wept. Almost. Tears were private things, and she had not yet decided whether Brook Street was safe enough for them. By the next morning, the gossip had already arrived ahead of the tea tray. 2 calling cards came before 11 o'clock from ladies who had ignored Beatrice for years. A third arrived with a note so full of concern that Lady Winifred read 3 lines, lifted one brow, and dropped it into the fire. "Concern," she said, "is often curiosity wearing gloves." Beatrice sat opposite her, hands folded in her lap. She had slept badly. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Penmere's drawing room, the red wax breaking, Sir Felix's smile shrinking, and the Duke's gaze resting on her as if he had heard not only her words but every silence that had preceded them. The brass key lay in the pocket of her black morning gown. She had not put it away. She did not yet trust drawers. "Will they all talk?" she asked. Lady Winifred poured tea. "Of course. London is a city held together by ribbons, credit, and conversation. The question is not whether they talk. The question is who teaches them the correct version to repeat." Before Beatrice could answer, the butler entered with a salver. 1 card lay upon it, plain, heavy, and without ornament. Lady Winifred glanced at it. Something like amusement touched her face. "His Grace is prompt." Beatrice's fingers tightened once, then stilled. Lady Winifred noticed, because Lady Winifred appeared to notice everything worth hiding. "You need not receive him if you are unequal to it." "I am not unequal to it," Beatrice said. It came out too quickly. The older woman's gaze softened, though her voice did not. "Good. Pride is not always wisdom, but it can be useful before noon." She turned to the butler. "His Grace may be shown in. Leave the door open until I instruct otherwise, and place another chair where propriety can see it from the corridor." The Duke of Harrow-mere entered a few minutes later in a dark coat cut with severe perfection. He bowed to Lady Winifred first, with the respect due an old friend of his mother. Then he bowed to Beatrice. Not a grand gesture. Not theatrical. Exact. That was becoming the word she associated with him. He did not waste movement, and somehow that made each movement more difficult to ignore. "Lady Winifred," he said. "Miss Ellowes." "Your Grace," Beatrice replied. Lady Winifred looked between them with bright, unsentimental interest. "We shall have tea before anyone says anything dramatic. Men are inclined to treat conversation as a battlefield when biscuits would improve them." The Duke accepted this rebuke without visible offense. "I shall endeavor to be improved." Beatrice looked down quickly, but not before the corner of her mouth betrayed her. The Duke saw it. His expression did not soften exactly, yet something less severe entered his eyes and was gone almost at once. Lady Winifred poured. For several minutes, they spoke of the weather, the state of the roads, and whether morning invitations would be accepted or refused. The ordinary conversation steadied Beatrice more than reassurance would have done. No one mentioned beasts. No one mentioned purchase. No one stared at her patched gloves. At last, Lady Winifred set down her cup. Now, His Grace has not come to admire my tea service. The Duke turned to Beatrice. I have come to confirm what should have been made clear yesterday. You are not bound to me by Lord Penmere's will. You are bound only to an opportunity to consider what he arranged. Beatrice held his gaze. An opportunity can become a chain if everyone in London chooses to describe it so. Then London must be corrected. London rarely accepts correction from women without fortune. It accepts correction from a duke when the duke is sufficiently unpleasant about it. Lady Winifred made a sound that might have been approval. Beatrice did not smile this time. The danger beneath the exchange was too real. If I refuse the courtship, she said, I will be called ungrateful, proud, and foolish. If I accept, I will be called ambitious, trapped, and purchased. I would prefer not to be ruined by every possible answer. The Duke leaned forward slightly, his hands resting apart on his knees. Then we establish terms before anyone else writes them for us. The phrase startled her. Us. Not as intimacy. As alliance. Terms, she repeated. 3 months, he said. Formal calls. Public civility. No private meetings without Lady Winifred or another suitable chaperone. No announcement of an engagement. No implication that your answer has been given before it has been given. At the end of the period, you may refuse me without penalty to your reputation. Beatrice looked at him carefully. You cannot command people not to think I am a fortune hunter. No, he said. But I can make it socially inconvenient for them to say so aloud. That is not the same thing. It is often the beginning of the same thing. Lady Winifred sipped her tea, visibly entertained. Beatrice drew a slow breath. If I refuse you, Your Grace, you must not allow society to say I courted you for advantage and failed. Agreed. You must say publicly that the decision was honorable. Agreed. And if you refuse me? His face stilled. It was the first condition that appeared to cost him thought. Then I will state that I was unworthy of the trust Lord Penmere attempted to place in me. Beatrice blinked. That is not necessary. It is. It would damage you. Less than it would damage you if I allowed silence to do the work of cruelty. The room quieted around the sentence. Beatrice looked at the man across from her, the feared duke whose name made drawing rooms hesitate, and tried to place him among the categories she knew. Cold men she understood. Proud men, cruel men, charming men, careless men. But this man spoke of reputation as if it were not vanity but shelter, and he seemed to understand how easily women were locked outside it. That understanding did not make him safe. It made him dangerous in a new way. Why did Lord Penmere choose you? She asked. Lady Winifred's cup paused halfway to its saucer. The Duke's gaze dropped, just briefly, to Beatrice's gloved hand. I do not yet know all of his reasons. That is not an answer. No, he said. It is the only honest portion of one. Beatrice waited. He looked toward the fire, then back at her. I heard your mother's name once, many years ago, in my father's study. I was not meant to hear it. There was anger in the room. Debt was mentioned. Honor as well. I was too young to understand the matter, and by the time I was old enough to ask, my father was dead. The brass key seemed to grow heavier in Beatrice's pocket. Was my mother accused? Yes. The word struck cleanly because he did not soften it. Of what? Deception. Beatrice's chin lifted. And did you believe it? He was silent for one breath. I believed my father. Sons often do, before they learn fathers are men. Lady Winifred looked away, as if granting the confession privacy within a public room. Beatrice felt anger rise, bright and protective, not for herself but for the mother whose life had been reduced to fragments in other people's mouths. Then perhaps Lord Penmere chose you because your house helped ruin her. The Duke accepted the blow without flinching. Perhaps. And you came anyway? Yes. Why? Because if my house owed a debt, I would rather pay it to a woman standing than pretend I never saw her pushed. Beatrice's breath caught before she could prevent it. He saw that too, and at once he withdrew a little, not physically, but in pressure. He reached into his coat and drew out a folded paper. A list of hostesses who have already invited me to assemblies and dinners in the coming weeks. I have instructed my secretary to reply that any invitation extended to me must include you and Lady Winifred, or it will be declined. Lady Winifred laughed outright. That will cause palpitations from Grosvenor Square to Berkeley Square. Good, said the Duke. Beatrice should have been grateful. Instead, she was wary. You make me visible by force. I make their discourtesy visible by refusing to indulge it. There is a difference. A necessary one. He placed the paper on the table between them. He did not push it toward her, and that restraint affected her more than insistence would have done. Beatrice drew the brass key from her pocket and set it beside the list. The Duke's eyes went to it. His face changed again, almost imperceptibly. You recognize it, she said. Not the key itself. The workmanship. My father kept a strongbox with a similar lock. At Harrow-mere. Yes. She reached to take the key back, but he had already lifted it, only to place it gently in her open palm. His glove did not brush her skin. The care of that distance unsettled her. Keep it, he said. No honest man asks a woman to surrender the only thing that is hers. Beatrice closed her fingers over the key. In Penmere House, the same object had felt like a secret. Here, under his unsmiling gaze and Lady Winifred's sharp protection, it felt like evidence. Not enough to free her. Enough to begin. A footman entered with a new salver. This time, the card was edged in cream and tied to an invitation written in a graceful feminine hand. Lady Winifred read it first. A private assembly at Mrs. Vale Cresswell's rooms. The Duke's eyes narrowed. She did not mention an assembly when she wrote to me this morning. Beatrice looked at the invitation. The words were elegant, the phrasing correct, and yet something in the handwriting tugged at memory. A curl of one letter. A slant too familiar. She had seen it on notes left for servants at Penmere House. Lady Winifred held the paper toward the firelight. Well, she said, it appears London has decided to begin before we are ready. Beatrice folded the key into her palm and looked at the Duke. Then we had better be ready. By 8 o'clock 3 evenings later, Beatrice understood that a private assembly could be more dangerous than any public ballroom precisely because everyone there pretended it was intimate. Mrs. Vale Cresswell's rooms glowed with candlelight, cream silk, polished floors, and the sort of careful music that made malice seem well bred. Lady Winifred had written twice to confirm the invitation, and Mrs. Vale Cresswell, alarmed by the possibility of offending a duke, had replied that Miss Ellowes and Lady Winifred were most welcome. The handwriting on that reply had been different from the first invitation. No one said Celeste's name. They did not need to. Beatrice entered on Lady Winifred's arm in a black gown trimmed with narrow white ribbon, her gloves freshly mended and her brass key tucked into the small inner pocket of her reticule. She felt the room notice her before it looked at her. That was worse than being ignored. Being ignored allowed a woman to breathe. Being noticed by London was like being placed beneath glass. Heads turned. Fans paused. A widow near the refreshment table whispered behind lace. A young lady with pearls at her throat looked at Beatrice, then quickly looked away, as if misfortune could be caught by eye contact. Lady Winifred's posture remained magnificently indifferent. Remember, she murmured, a room full of people waiting for you to blush is a room that has already confessed its vulgarity. That is comforting, Beatrice said softly. No, my dear. It is useful. Comfort is for later. The Duke had not arrived with them. That had been Lady Winifred's advice. If you enter under his shadow, she had said, they will say you cannot stand without it. Let them first see your spine. Beatrice had repeated that sentence to herself in the carriage until it became almost enough. Almost. Across the room, Celeste Branton stood beside a cluster of bright young ladies, dressed in pale grey that made her look tender and injured. It was cleverly chosen. A girl in grey could wound while appearing wounded. When Celeste saw Beatrice, her face opened into surprise so delicate that only someone raised among polite cruelties would recognize it as triumph. "Miss Ellowes," she said as Beatrice and Lady Winifred approached. "How brave of you to come." Lady Winifred smiled. "My dear Miss Branton, bravery is usually required only when others behave badly. We shall hope the evening disappoints us." Celeste's lashes lowered. "Of course, Lady Winifred. I meant only that Miss Ellowes must find so much attention fatiguing." "Not nearly so fatiguing as pity," Beatrice said. A small silence opened around them. Celeste's smile remained, but one edge of it tightened. "How sharp you have become since yesterday." "No," Beatrice said. "Only less convenient." Lady Winifred gave the slightest pressure to her arm, whether warning or approval Beatrice could not tell. Music began. Couples arranged themselves with all the grace and calculation of a campaign. Beatrice had no expectation of dancing and no wish to be displayed as a curiosity. She would stand, speak when required, and leave with her dignity unspent. That plan lasted 9 minutes. A gentleman detached himself from the card tables and approached with a bow too deep to be respectful. He was perhaps 30, handsome in a soft and forgettable way, with pale hair and a waistcoat embroidered beyond good sense. Beatrice knew him by sight. Mr. Lionel Crewe, a friend of Sir Felix, a man who laughed before deciding whether a thing was amusing. "Miss Ellowes," he said, "may I have the honor of this dance?" Lady Winifred's expression cooled. Beatrice understood at once. A man like Mr. Crewe did not seek her out from admiration. He had been sent, or encouraged, or tempted by the pleasure of being cruel before witnesses. Refusing him might appear proud. Accepting him might place her at his mercy for an entire set. "Thank you, Mr. Crewe," she said. "I am not dancing this evening." He looked theatrically wounded. "Not dancing? But surely a lady in your situation should welcome every opportunity to be seen." The nearest fan stopped moving. Beatrice felt the heat of attention gather. "My situation?" she asked. Mr. Crewe smiled. "Forgive me. I only meant that when fortune smiles so unexpectedly, one must show gratitude to the room that receives one." "Fortune has not smiled at me," Beatrice said. "It has merely stopped allowing others to speak for it." His eyes flicked beyond her shoulder. Celeste was watching. So was half the room. "Come, Miss Ellowes. We all understand the world. A title here, a settlement there, a little old paper read in the right room. You have priced yourself very well." The insult was quiet enough to seem deniable and clear enough to wound. Lady Winifred began to move, but Beatrice touched her arm. "Not yet." She looked at Mr. Crewe's offered hand, then at his face. "You must forgive me," she said. "I misunderstood your invitation." He blinked. "Did you?" "Yes. I thought you were asking for a dance. I did not realize you were asking to be corrected in public." A faint sound ran through the circle, not laughter, not yet, but the intake before it. Mr. Crewe's color rose. "I beg your pardon. You have made 3 errors," Beatrice said. Her voice remained calm, which made people lean closer. "First, a woman is not priced because men discuss her fortune. Second, gratitude is not owed to those who confuse curiosity with welcome. Third, if you wish to insult me, you should have chosen phrasing your friends had not already used." Celeste's face changed. It was swift, but Beatrice saw it. Mr. Crewe's eyes hardened. "You give yourself consequence, Miss Ellowes." "No," Beatrice said. "You did, when you crossed the room to speak to me." The silence broke into a scattered murmur. Mr. Crewe looked as though he wanted to retreat but could not find a graceful direction. Then the room shifted again, not with sound, but with awareness. Beatrice did not need to turn to know who had arrived. The Duke of Harrow-mere entered as if he had not come late, but exactly when the evening required him. He wore black, unadorned except for a white cravat and the severe line of a coat that made other men's finery look like apology. Mrs. Vale Cresswell fluttered beside him, pale with delight and alarm. His gaze crossed the room, found Beatrice, and then moved to Mr. Crewe. The gentleman bowed too quickly. "Your Grace." The Duke came to a stop a few feet away. "Mr. Crewe." He did not ask what had happened. That saved everyone the comfort of pretending confusion. "I hope I have not interrupted." Mr. Crewe tried to laugh. "Not at all. Miss Ellowes and I were merely discussing the hazards of sudden prominence." "Were you?" "A harmless exchange." The Duke looked at Beatrice. "Miss Ellowes?" The question was simple. It gave the account to her. Not to the man. Not to the room. To her. "Mr. Crewe invited me to dance," she said. Then explained that I had priced myself well. The words were plain. Their plainness exposed the ugliness. Mr. Crewe's mouth opened. "I didn't mean it as it's being made to sound." "Then you have been unfortunate in both meaning and sound," the Duke said. A nervous laugh escaped someone near the pianoforte and died immediately. The Duke's voice did not rise. "Miss Ellowes has already answered you, I gather." "She refused the dance," Mr. Crewe said stiffly. "No," the Duke said. "She refused the insult. The distinction is within the reach of most gentlemen." Mr. Crewe bowed again, more rigidly this time, and withdrew with the wounded pride of a man denied admiration for cruelty. Celeste turned away too late. The Duke saw her. He gave no sign. That was somehow more alarming. Lady Winifred looked pleased enough to forgive the evening's several defects. Beatrice expected the Duke to offer his arm and remove her from scrutiny. Instead, he stood beside her, facing the room as if he had taken his place not before her, not behind her, but at the point where insult would have to pass him to reach her. "You did not need rescuing," he said quietly. Beatrice kept her eyes on the dancers forming at the far end of the room. "That is fortunate, since I had not asked to be rescued." "No. You needed witnesses." Something in her chest tightened. "Witnesses. Not saviors. Not owners. Witnesses." The musicians began a waltz. It was not improper now, not in these rooms and not with Lady Winifred present, though it still carried enough intimacy to give gossip a shape. Beatrice sensed the room waiting again. The Duke turned toward her and bowed. "Miss Ellowes, may I have the honor?" She could refuse. He had made that clear in every careful distance he kept. Yet refusal now would let Mr. Crewe's insult remain the last public gesture made toward her. Acceptance would not mean surrender. It would mean she chose the next image. She placed her gloved hand in his. "You may, Your Grace." The first turn carried them into the candlelight. His hand rested at the proper distance, firm and respectful. He did not draw her closer than etiquette allowed. That restraint unsettled her more than presumption would have done. "The room is staring," she said. "Yes. Does that not trouble you? I have been stared at for less worthy reasons." She looked up despite herself. The scar near his temple caught the light and vanished again as they turned. "And what reason do they have tonight?" "They are watching a woman they misjudged remain standing." Her breath caught. Only a little. Enough for him to notice. His expression did not soften, but his voice lowered. "Do you remember anything of the East Stair room?" Beatrice followed the steps automatically, grateful for the discipline of movement. A narrow door. Green paint once, though it may have darkened. "I remember being told it was unsafe." "By whom?" "Lady Honoria." "Of course. You think my mother's papers are there?" "I think Lord Penmere believed something was there." "And you?" His gaze held hers through the turn. "I think your key frightened the wrong people." Before she could answer, the set ended. Applause rose, polite and thin at first, then stronger as people realized the Duke did not intend to look ashamed of his partner. He released her hand at once. Perfectly correct. Perfectly controlled. Beatrice should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the absence of his touch like a question. Lady Winifred reclaimed her with satisfaction. "A useful evening," she said. "I would not call it pleasant. Usefulness lasts longer." As Beatrice reached for her reticule, a folded note slipped from between the fan sticks on the side table beside her. It had not been there when she arrived. Her name was written across it in a slanted hand she did not know. She opened it only enough to read the single line inside. "Ask His Grace why he truly fears that key." The music began again, bright and indifferent. Across the room, the Duke was speaking to Mrs. Vale Cresswell, but his eyes found Beatrice as if he had felt the paper cut the air between them. She closed her fingers around the note and, beneath the silk of her reticule, around the small brass key. For the first time that evening, the room no longer felt like the trap. It felt like the beginning of one. Beatrice did not sleep after the assembly. The note lay beneath her candle until dawn thinned the darkness over Brook Street, its single line more disturbing than any open insult Mr. Crewe had dared to offer. "Ask His Grace why he truly fears that key." It was the word truly that unsettled her. It implied that the Duke had already given one reason and hidden another. By breakfast, Lady Winifred had read the note, burned it, and sent for Mr. Pritchard before Beatrice had finished her tea. "We shall not be lured into corners by anonymous ink," she said. "If there is a locked room, we enter it in daylight with witnesses and decent gloves." The Duke arrived within the hour, grave, unsmiling, and fully dressed for a visit no polite family could pretend was social. Beatrice watched his eyes move once to the pocket where she kept the brass key. "You received a note," he said. Lady Winifred looked up sharply. "Did she tell you?" No, his gaze remained on Beatrice. "But Mrs. Vale Cresswell wrote that Miss Branton left early and that Mr. Crewe spent the remainder of the evening pretending not to have been corrected. Anonymous courage often follows public failure." Beatrice drew the key from her pocket and placed it on the breakfast table between them. "The note said you fear this." The Duke did not answer at once. That silence stung more than denial would have done. "Do you?" she asked. He looked at the key as if it were not brass, but memory. "I fear what men do to keep old stories buried." "That is careful." "It is honest." "It is incomplete." Lady Winifred set down her cup. "Good. Then we shall complete it somewhere more useful than my breakfast room." By 11 o'clock, 2 carriages stood before Penmere House. Beatrice arrived with Lady Winifred, Mr. Pritchard, and the Duke in proper attendance. No secrecy. No hurried side entrance. No appearance of guilt. Beatrice stepped from Lady Winifred's carriage beneath the gaze of the same footman who had once seen her sent to fetch shawls and account books. His eyes flickered to the Duke, then to her. He bowed more deeply than he ever had. That small change should not have mattered. It did. Sir Felix met them in the entrance hall, dressed as if he had been interrupted in important business, though the tension in his jaw said he had been waiting. "This is an intrusion," he said. Lady Winifred swept past him. "How fortunate that you have a hall large enough to receive one." The Duke removed his gloves finger by finger. "We have come to inspect the room beneath the east stair, as provided in Lord Penmere's memorandum. You have no authority to rummage through family rooms." Mr. Pritchard opened his leather case and withdrew a folded copy. The late Lord's instructions named the room, the key, and Miss Ellowes's right to witness any search relating to Eleanor Ellowes's property. Sir Felix smiled at Beatrice. "How swiftly you have become accustomed to command." Beatrice felt the old impulse to lower her eyes. She did not obey it. "No. I have become less accustomed to being dismissed." A movement on the landing drew her glance. Celeste stood above them, one hand upon the rail, pale and lovely in morning blue. She looked not at Beatrice, but at the Duke. "Your Grace," she said, descending with graceful caution, "I hope Miss Ellowes has not been distressed by foolish gossip. London can be cruel when a lady rises too suddenly." "London is often crueler when a lady rises at all," he replied. Celeste's smile faltered. Lady Honoria appeared behind her, composed, jewelled, and cold. "If this pantomime must occur, let us end it quickly. I will not have servants repeating that Penmere House hides treasure behind staircases." "Then let the servants witness that it does not," Beatrice said. The word surprised Lady Honoria. They surprised Beatrice less. Something in her had altered the moment she placed the key on the will table. She could still feel fear. But fear no longer seemed a sufficient reason to hand her life back to those who had mishandled it. 2 footmen, the housekeeper, and Mr. Pritchard's clerk were summoned. The little procession moved toward the east stair, where a narrow door sat half hidden behind a carved screen and a stand of old walking sticks. Beatrice remembered the green paint as brighter. Now it had darkened with age and neglect. The brass key warmed in her hand. Sir Felix stood too close. The Duke noticed. "Give Miss Ellowes room. I am merely observing." "Then observe from there. One quiet word." "There." Sir Felix stopped 2 steps back. Beatrice fitted the key into the lock. For one awful second, it resisted. Celeste breathed out a soft laugh. Then Beatrice turned her wrist more gently, and the lock gave. The sound was small, but every person heard it. The room beyond smelled of dust, dried wood, and the faint lavender scent that sometimes clings to old drawers long after flowers are gone. It was smaller than memory, hardly wider than 12 feet, with a sloped ceiling beneath the stair and one high window filmed with grey light. A cabinet stood against the inner wall. Its surface was scratched, and one handle had been replaced by plain wire. Beatrice knew it at once. Not from memory of the object, but from the sudden ache of recognition. Her mother had touched this room. Her mother had kept something here. Mr. Pritchard instructed his clerk to record each item. Music sheets. A cracked ivory-handled penknife. A miniature portrait wrapped in tissue. A ribbon, cut sharply through the middle. At the back of the cabinet, beneath a loose lining, Beatrice found half a folded letter. The other half had been torn away. The handwriting was faded, but the first word struck with the force of a voice returning from a locked place. "Do not let them tell my daughter she was Charity." Beatrice sat back on her heels. For a moment, the room lost shape. Not because she was faint. She had never been allowed the luxury of fainting. The words had entered her too directly. Charity. How often had Lady Honoria used that word without speaking it? How often had Beatrice swallowed gratitude because the alternative was hunger, homelessness, or being reminded of her mother's disgrace? The paper trembled in her hand. The Duke crouched at a proper distance, not touching her, not taking the letter. "Miss Ellowes." His voice was low enough that the others could not make spectacle of it. "Breathe." She did. Once. Then again. She looked up and found him watching her not with pity, but with a grave anger held carefully away from her. "Did you know?" she asked. He did not pretend not to understand. "No, but you heard her called deceitful." "Yes." "And you believed it." The words should have sounded accusing. They sounded tired. His face tightened. "I was a boy, and I believed my father because his voice filled every room I entered. That is not an excuse. It is only the shape of my failure." She looked down at the torn letter. "Why did you never ask later?" "Because by the time I was old enough to question him, I had learned to fear the answers attached to his debts." That was the most personal thing he had said to her. It changed nothing. It changed the air. Lady Honoria's voice cut from the doorway. "A sentimental scrap. Hardly proof of anything." Beatrice rose with the letter in hand. The tremor had left her fingers. "It proves my mother expected someone to lie about me." Sir Felix moved toward the cabinet. "Let me see the rest of what has been planted here." The Duke stepped between him and the shelves with such controlled speed that Sir Felix stopped short without being touched. "You will not lay a hand on anything until it is inventoried. This is my uncle's house. And possibly Miss Ellowes as evidence." Mr. Pritchard looked to the clerk. "Record that Sir Felix attempted to approach the cabinet before inventory was complete." "You make a theatre of suspicion," Sir Felix snapped. Beatrice turned on him. "No. I make a record. There is a difference." The housekeeper, Mrs. Barlow, who had stood silent near the door, lowered her eyes quickly. Not quickly enough. Beatrice saw grief there. Or guilt. Before she could ask, Lady Honoria ordered the servants back to their work. The Duke's voice stopped them. "They remain until Mr. Pritchard dismisses them." Lady Honoria's face hardened. "Your Grace forgets whose roof covers him." "No," he said. "I remember too well what roofs are used to hide." The inventory continued. No full packet appeared. No settlement papers. No second half of the letter. Only absence, which in that room felt less like emptiness than theft. When they emerged at last, Beatrice carried the torn letter in a protective wrapper prepared by Mr. Pritchard. Sir Felix wore calm again, but it fitted badly now. Celeste would not look at the ribbon. At the front door, the Duke paused beside Beatrice while Lady Winifred spoke to Mr. Pritchard about lodging a copy of the inventory. "I am sorry," he said. She looked at him. "For my mother. For having once believed the room that spoke against her." Beatrice held the wrapped letter against her glove. "I have been poor before. I will not be made false as well." Something in his eyes shifted, solemn and unmistakable. "No," he said. "You will not." The next morning, before Lady Winifred's household had finished breakfast, a gossip sheet arrived folded beneath a calling card with no name. Its headline had already begun its work across London. "Miss Ellowes produces convenient relic to secure a duke." Beatrice read it once. Then she placed her mother's torn letter beside the brass key and understood that whoever had stolen the rest of the truth had decided to strike first. By noon, the gossip sheet had done what poison always did best in London. It had travelled faster than truth and arrived dressed as entertainment. "Miss Ellowes produces convenient relic to secure a duke." The sentence appeared on breakfast tables in Mayfair, was read behind fans in milliners' shops, repeated in carriages, and improved upon by people who had never seen the East Stair room, the torn letter, or Beatrice's face when her mother's words emerged from dust. At Brook Street, Lady Winifred read the sheet once, folded it with terrifying neatness, and laid it beside the tea-urn as if it were an insect she had not yet decided to crush. "Efficient," she said. Beatrice stood at the window with Eleanor's torn letter locked in Mr. Pritchard's protective wrapper and the brass key in her pocket. "Cruelty often is." Lady Winifred glanced at her. "Good. You are angry. Anger has more posture than despair." Beatrice did not feel dramatic anger. She felt something colder. Yesterday, the room beneath the east stair had smelled of lavender, dust, and a life stolen in fragments. Today, London had turned that discovery into a performance of ambition. Her mother's sentence still pressed behind her eyes. "Do not let them tell my daughter she was charity." Yet London was already doing worse. It was calling her a fraud. Before Lady Winifred could summon Mr. Pritchard, another note arrived. This one bore Lady Honoria Branton's hand, elegant and smooth, requesting the pleasure of Lady Winifred's and Miss Ellowes's company at a small tea that afternoon, so that confusion may be soothed among friends. Lady Winifred laughed without amusement. "A small tea is a battlefield with cakes." "Then we should not go," Beatrice said, though she knew as soon as she spoke that avoidance would be made into guilt by evening. Lady Winifred saw the same truth. "We shall go. We shall not stay long. We shall not explain ourselves to fools. And we shall ensure that if Lady Honoria has prepared a trap, she must spring it in front of witnesses who can spell their own names." The Duke did not call that morning. A note came instead, brief and formal. He had been summoned to Lincoln's Inn on a matter connected to the Penmere Trust and would join them if required. Beatrice read the line twice. If required. She disliked the unreasonable ache the phrase caused. He had promised nothing beyond terms, propriety, and public civility. He was not her champion by contract. He was not even her suitor by affection. Yet she had come to expect the weight of his attention beside her when the room sharpened its knives. That expectation frightened her more than Lady Honoria's invitation. By 4 o'clock, Lady Honoria's drawing-room contained exactly the sort of women who could ruin a reputation while murmuring about sympathy. Mrs. Vale Cresswell sat near the fire, anxious and curious. Lady Sefton's widowed sister occupied the best chair and pretended deafness until scandal grew interesting. Celeste poured tea with a sweet, wounded air, her pale gown trimmed in blue ribbons that made her look like innocents arranged by committee. Sir Felix stood near the mantel, not part of the tea and yet central to its purpose. He bowed when Beatrice entered. "Miss Ellowes." "How courageous." Lady Winifred answered before Beatrice could. "That word follows us everywhere. I begin to suspect courage is what people call a lady when they expected her to be ashamed." Lady Honoria came forward with both hands extended, stopping just short of touching Beatrice. "My dear, I am relieved you came. There has been such unfortunate talk. I thought a quiet gathering might protect you from harsher interpretations. Beatrice looked around the crowded room. How thoughtful to protect me with an audience. A cup rattled. Celeste's smile tightened. Lady Honoria lowered her voice just enough to create the illusion of intimacy. You must not mistake concern for accusation. I shall try not to, Beatrice said. Provided concern does not bring evidence. The word shifted the room. There it was. The bait. Lady Honoria sighed, and the performance began. I had hoped to spare you. Sir Felix moved from the mantel and drew a folded letter from inside his coat. The paper was cream, the fold precise, the seal already broken. Beatrice's stomach tightened, but her face remained still. This came into my possession only this morning, Sir Felix said. I did not wish to believe it. Lady Winifred held out a hand. Then you will have no objection to my reading it. It was addressed to me. Then you may enjoy the memory of that privilege while handing it here. Sir Felix hesitated, then gave it to Lady Honoria instead. She opened it with sorrowful reluctance. It appears to be from Miss Ellowes. Beatrice felt the room turn. Not dramatically. Worse. Hungrily. Lady Honoria read aloud. Sir Felix, you underestimate me. Harrow-mere thinks himself the one using the will, but I shall use him before he uses me. Once Northgate and the settlement are secure, London may call me what it likes. They will still have to call me Duchess. A sound moved through the ladies, soft as silk dragged over a blade. Celeste looked down, lashes trembling in a masterpiece of pity. Beatrice felt the insult enter the air and try to settle on her skin. Not merely ambitious. Vulgar. Calculating. Exactly what London had been waiting to believe. Lady Winifred's eyes flashed. Conveniently wicked. That is always the trouble with forged villainy. It has no taste. Sir Felix stiffened. Lady Winifred. Do not Lady Winifred me, young man. I have read better lies from schoolboys avoiding Latin. Beatrice stepped forward. May I see it? Lady Honoria pressed the paper to her heart. My dear, I fear it will distress you. Being condemned by what I am not permitted to examine would distress me more. A few eyes shifted. It was a reasonable request. Even malice had to bow occasionally to reason if enough people watched. Lady Honoria gave her the letter. Beatrice took it with hands that did not tremble. At first glance, the writing did look like hers. The slope of the letters, the careful spacing, the restrained hand of a woman trained to copy household accounts without flourish. It was close enough to frighten her. Then she saw the phrase. Use him before he uses me. Not her rhythm. Not her thought. She would never write a sentence so eager to be overheard. The ink, too, sat strangely dark in the cross-strokes. Fresh. Too fresh for a letter Sir Felix claimed had been sent before yesterday's discovery. Well? Celeste asked softly. Beatrice looked at her. How curious. Lady Honoria's mouth thinned. Curious? Yes. Whoever wrote this was familiar with my hand, but not with my habits. Sir Felix gave a low laugh. A desperate distinction. Not desperate. Specific. She held up the page. I do not form the capital H in Harrow-mere this way. I was corrected for it by Lord Penmere when copying an invitation last winter. I never forgot the correction. Lady Honoria's eyes flickered. Beatrice continued, quieter now, forcing the room to listen. The phrase use him before he uses me is not mine. It is theatrical. It sounds like someone trying to imagine ambition from the outside. Her gaze passed to Celeste, then away. And the ink is too dark in the lower line. It has not aged with the rest of the page. Sir Felix's voice sharpened. You deny it, then? I deny the cowardice of it more than the ink. Silence. The sentence struck harder than anger would have done. For a moment, Beatrice thought the room might turn. Then Lady Honoria placed one hand on the arm of her chair. A clever denial. But cleverness is not innocence. Nor is accusation proof, Lady Winifred said. "Where is his Grace?" asked Mrs. Vale Cresswell, unable to restrain herself. The question opened the second wound of the afternoon. Where was he? Beatrice heard a faint movement near the door. A servant entered and whispered to Sir Felix, whose expression altered only by a hair. Relief! That was what Beatrice saw. Sir Felix turned to the room. The Duke has been detained at Lincoln's Inn. Apparently, the matter of the trust required urgent clarification. Lady Winifred's eyes narrowed. How fortunate for you. Sir Felix bowed. For truth, I hope. The ladies heard what they wished to hear. The Duke had not come. Therefore the Duke was uncertain. Therefore Beatrice was exposed. That was how reputation died, not by proof, but by absence. Lady Honoria took the letter back and folded it. My dear Beatrice, no one here wishes you harm. But if this courtship has proceeded under misunderstanding, perhaps the most dignified course would be withdrawal before his Grace is placed in an impossible position. Beatrice's pride steadied her where hope could not. I shall not withdraw from my mother's truth because someone has practiced my handwriting. The door opened. This time, the room did not merely turn. It recoiled into attention. The Duke of Harrow-mere stood on the threshold, his expression colder than Beatrice had ever seen it. His coat bore the faint damp of the street, and his eyes moved once across the gathering, counting faces, distances, guilt. Sir Felix's relief vanished. Lady Honoria rose with a hand at her throat. Your Grace. We did not expect you so soon. That is becoming evident. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. I was sent to Lincoln's Inn to answer a question no one there had asked. Lady Winifred smiled without warmth. Imagine that. The Duke's gaze found Beatrice. It held there a moment before he looked at the folded paper in Lady Honoria's hand. What has been placed before Miss Ellowes? Sir Felix answered. A letter in her hand. Give it to me. Lady Honoria hesitated. Then she obeyed. The Duke read in silence. Beatrice watched his face for disbelief, anger, recognition, anything. Nothing moved. The room watched him too. That was the cruelty of his rank. His silence had weight. If he spoke for her, the room would bend. If he doubted her, it would devour. He looked at the page for too long. Only a few seconds, perhaps. But society did not need minutes to create a verdict. Beatrice felt the old coldness return, the one she had known at Penmere House when rooms decided what she was before she entered them. At last, the Duke lifted his eyes. Not to her. To the letter. Then back again. His silence remained unbroken, and Beatrice understood with a clarity that hurt more than accusation. By nightfall, London would not say he had read carefully. It would say he had paused. And that would be enough. The Duke's silence did not last long enough to be called betrayal by any fair-minded person, but London was not fair-minded, and Beatrice knew before he spoke that the damage had already begun. He stood in Lady Honoria's drawing-room with the forged letter in his hand, the firelight touching the edge of the paper, his face unreadable to everyone except those who wished to read ruin into it. Lady Honoria watched him with careful sorrow. Sir Felix watched him with a satisfaction too polished to be open triumph. Celeste lowered her eyes, the picture of wounded innocence, though Beatrice saw the quick rise and fall of her breath. The Duke folded the letter once. This will be examined. Lady Honoria's hand moved to her throat. Examined? Your Grace, surely Miss Ellowes has offered her explanation. An explanation is not the same as evidence. The words were true. They were also disastrous. Beatrice felt Lady Winifred turn sharply beside her. The room heard not caution, but doubt. That was how society listened when a woman's reputation hung before it. It did not hear precision. It heard permission. Beatrice kept her face still. She would not let Lady Honoria see the wound land. Your Grace, Lady Winifred said, each word wrapped in frost, I trust you intend to be very clear. The Duke's gaze moved to Beatrice then, and something in it tightened, as if he understood too late that truth handled poorly could resemble cruelty. I intend to prevent further falsehood. Then don't give falsehood a chair while you arrange the room, Lady Winifred replied. Sir Felix gave a small bow. How admirable that everyone wishes only justice. The Duke turned on him. You would not recognize justice if it signed your name in your own blood. The insult was controlled enough for a drawing-room, but sharp enough to chill it. Sir Felix went pale with anger, though he smiled. Beatrice should have felt defended. Instead, she felt suspended. The Duke had struck at Sir Felix, but he had not said the one thing the room required. He had not said, "I believe her." He looked back at Beatrice. "Miss Ellowes, until the origin of this letter is established, I believe it prudent that we suspend public appearances." Lady Honoria's eyes gleamed. Celeste looked down more quickly. The room inhaled its verdict. Suspend. Public appearances. 3 words, each a nail driven neatly into the fragile shelter he had promised her. Beatrice heard a lady near the window whisper, "Oh, dear." Not sympathy. Appetite. Lady Winifred rose as if age had never touched her bones. "We are leaving." The Duke took one step toward Beatrice. "Miss Ellowes." She curtsied. Not deeply. Not warmly. Correctly. "Your Grace." "You misunderstand me." "I hope I do." The sentence was quiet enough that only he and Lady Winifred heard it. His face changed. Only a little. Enough. She did not wait for his reply. Lady Winifred guided her from the room with the dignity of a duchess escorting a queen from bad company. No one stopped them. That was the final insult. By evening, 3 cards had been withdrawn, 2 invitations postponed, and 1 note delivered with regret so elaborate that Lady Winifred threw it into the fire unread after the second line. Beatrice sat at the small writing desk in her chamber, the brass key lying beside her mother's torn letter. She had not wept. The absence of tears felt less like strength than exhaustion. The Duke had not accused her. He had not abandoned the investigation. He had done what powerful men often did when faced with danger. He had chosen strategy. But she was the one who would be made to pay for the pause. A man's prudence became a woman's guilt in less time than it took to pour tea. Lady Winifred entered without waiting to be asked, carrying a shawl and wearing the expression of a general who had discovered that an ally had marched in the wrong direction. "He is not a fool," she said. Beatrice looked at the key. "No. That is what makes it worse. He is accustomed to being obeyed when he says wait. I have been waiting all my life." Lady Winifred's face softened, but only briefly. "Then we shall stop." The next morning, Beatrice dressed plainly, pinned her bonnet, and asked for the carriage before breakfast was cleared. Lady Winifred did not ask whether she was certain. She merely rang for her gloves. "Mr. Pritchard first." "Yes," Beatrice said. The forged letter imitated my hand. My hand was most often used in Penmere ledgers. "Good." Lady Winifred's mouth tightened with approval. Evidence, not despair. Mr. Pritchard received them in his chambers near Lincoln's Inn, where shelves rose nearly to the ceiling and every table carried bundles of paper tied in tape. He looked older in morning light, but not surprised. "Miss Ellowes," he said, rising. "Lady Winifred." "I expected His Grace." Beatrice removed her gloves. "His Grace may do as he sees fit. I am here to do what is necessary." The solicitor's eye sharpened. "Very well." She placed her request before him with the calm she had built overnight from hurt and discipline. She wished to inspect any Penmere household account books containing her handwriting from the past 2 years. She wished to compare them with the forged letter. She wished to know who had access to the books after Lord Penmere's death. Mr. Pritchard listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded once. "That is a reasonable line of inquiry." Lady Winifred sat like a carved judgment near the window. "It is more than reasonable. It is what should have been done before anyone advised retreat." Mr. Pritchard did not defend the Duke. That improved Beatrice's opinion of him. Within the hour, 2 ledgers arrived from Penmere House by messenger, sent after a formal demand that Sir Felix could not refuse without appearing to conceal them. Beatrice knew the first book at once. Its brown leather corner had been scraped the winter before, when Lord Penmere dropped it beside his chair and blamed the footman. She opened it to pages of neat columns, household expenses, coal deliveries, candle accounts, linen repairs, and her own handwriting moving patiently through numbers that had never belonged to her. There it was. The capital H. The careful spacing. The restrained lines. A forger would have found plenty to copy. This one, she said, touching a page. I remember writing this. Celeste asked me to copy an invitation list on the same afternoon. She said my hand was steadier than hers. Lady Winifred leaned forward. Did she keep the page? Beatrice turned several leaves. Then she stopped. A page had been removed. Not cut cleanly. Torn close to the binding with enough care to avoid notice unless one looked for absence. Mr. Pritchard bent over the ledger. This was done recently. Can you prove that? Beatrice asked. Not as a court might like. But the tear is fresh. The neighboring page is disturbed. He lifted the book toward the light. And here. A faint offset from ink. Beatrice looked. The impression was too pale to read fully, but a phrase showed in broken ghosts. Use him. Her stomach turned cold. Lady Winifred stood. Miss Branton. Beatrice closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them. Celeste had reason to see that page. She had reason to copy my hand. And she heard Mr. Crewe say nearly the same insult at the assembly. Mr. Pritchard's expression grew grave. We must proceed carefully. Beatrice almost laughed. Carefully. Everyone wanted care when the injury was already hers. Proceed carefully, then, she said. But proceed. She sat at the solicitor's desk and took out a sheet of paper. The letter she wrote to the Duke was not long. Long letters invited persuasion. This one needed only truth. Your Grace has offered me safety. I find I require belief. She paused, then added, I shall continue the inquiry into my mother's property with Mr. Pritchard and Lady Winifred. I do not withdraw from the truth merely because society has been invited to doubt me. She signed her name. Not hurriedly. Not angrily. Clearly. When the Duke received it that afternoon at Harrow-mere House, he was standing beside his own desk with the forged letter, 2 notes from Lincoln's Inn, and a report from his secretary proving that the summons had been arranged by a clerk bribed through Sir Felix's man of business. He read Beatrice's letter once. Then again. The words did not accuse him of abandoning her. They did something worse. They described him accurately. He had offered safety. He had withheld belief in the only form society would understand. Publicly. The Duke of Harrow-mere, who had built his life upon control, looked down at the signature of the woman he had tried to protect and understood that his silence had given her enemies exactly what they lacked. It had given them room. The invitation to Harrow-mere House arrived at Brook Street at 10 o'clock the following morning, written not by a secretary but by the Duke's own hand. Beatrice knew it before Lady Winifred said so. There was too much control in the black ink, each letter disciplined as though it had been compelled to confess. Lady Winifred read the note once and passed it across the breakfast table. He asks for your presence at 3 o'clock, with mine, Mr. Pritchard's, and 2 witnesses of standing. Beatrice looked at the page without touching it. His Grace requests the opportunity to correct, before proper witnesses, an error of judgment made before improper ones. It was not an apology hidden in politeness. It was an apology made formal enough to be useful. That should have pleased her. Instead, it hurt in a quieter place, because she knew he had understood her letter. He had not answered with defense. He had answered with arrangement. Do you wish to go? Lady Winifred asked. Beatrice folded her hands in her lap. The brass key lay in her pocket, no longer a comfort, not exactly, but a weight that kept her present. Yes. Because you forgive him. No, Lady Winifred's eyes warmed. Good. Forgiveness before correction is how women are trained to misplace themselves. Harrow-mere House stood in Cavendish Square behind iron railings and a facade too severe to flatter anyone approaching it. It was not the largest house Beatrice had seen, but it had the stillness of a place that did not need to prove its consequence. Inside, the drawing-room had been arranged with ruthless propriety. Lady Winifred sat to Beatrice's right. Mr. Pritchard and his clerk occupied a table near the windows. Mrs. Vale Cresswell had been invited, along with Lord Davenley, an elderly peer known less for charm than for never repeating anything inaccurately. The Duke stood by the mantel, not sitting, not commanding the room by motion, but by the fact that everyone understood he could. When Beatrice entered, he bowed to her with a gravity that made conversation stop. "Miss Ellowes." "Your Grace." The words were ordinary. Nothing between them was. He looked at her for one moment longer than etiquette required, and Beatrice saw fatigue beneath his control. Not weakness. Wakefulness. A man who had spent the night discovering the cost of being careful too late. "I am grateful you came," he said. "I came for the matter, Your Grace." "I know." That answer unsettled her more than persuasion would have done. He did not ask for warmth he had not earned. He turned to the assembled witnesses. Yesterday, in Lady Honoria Branton's drawing-room, an accusation was placed before Miss Ellowes. I read the alleged letter and failed to say what the circumstances required me to say at once. Mrs. Vale Cresswell lowered her eyes. Lord Davenley leaned more heavily on his cane. Lady Winifred did not move. The Duke continued. My silence was taken as doubt. That consequence was foreseeable, and I failed to prevent it. Beatrice felt the room shift toward her, but not with hunger this time. With acknowledgement. It was a different kind of attention, and harder to bear because it did not ask her to defend herself. The Duke looked at her then. "Miss Ellowes, I wronged you." The sentence was plain. No ornament. No excuse. Something in Beatrice's throat tightened, but she kept still. "You did," she said. A faint breath passed through Mrs. Vale Cresswell. The Duke inclined his head, accepting the blow because it was not a blow. It was truth. "I believed I was denying your enemies haste," he said. "Instead, I gave their haste the cover of my caution. I feared scandal and called it prudence. You named it correctly. It was cowardice." Lady Winifred's fan closed with a soft snap. At last, a useful sentence from a gentleman. The Duke almost smiled, but not quite. He gestured to Mr. Pritchard. "The evidence." Mr. Pritchard laid out the forged letter, the household ledger, and a page of copied phrases from Penmere House. Beatrice watched the papers take their places like actors in a trial she had never consented to perform. Her hand closed once over the key in her pocket. The Duke saw the movement. His voice altered, not louder, but more careful. "This is not meant to reduce Miss Ellowes to a puzzle for gentlemen to solve. It is meant to correct the injury done by false evidence with evidence that can be witnessed." Her eyes lifted to his. He had anticipated the wound before she named it. That should not have mattered. It did. Mr. Pritchard spoke efficiently. "The forged letter imitates Miss Ellowes's general hand, but the model appears to have been taken from Penmere household ledgers. One relevant page was recently removed. The remaining ink impression bears the phrase 'use him,' which appears in the forged letter. The wording also resembles language spoken by Mr. Lionel Crewe at Mrs. Vale Cresswell's assembly, where Miss Branton was present and within hearing." Mrs. Vale Cresswell pressed one hand to her chest. "I did hear Mr. Crewe say something unforgivable. I cannot swear to every word, but I remember Miss Ellowes's reply. It was much better than he deserved." "Thank you," Beatrice said quietly. Lord Davenley adjusted his spectacles and examined the letter. "This is a vulgar piece of work. Too eager. A truly ambitious woman writes less like a villain in a play." Lady Winifred looked pleased. "I have said as much." The Duke took up a separate sheet. "My secretary has also confirmed that the message summoning me to Lincoln's Inn yesterday was arranged through a clerk approached by a man employed in Sir Felix Branton's business affairs. The question I was sent to answer had not been raised by Mr. Pritchard or by any trustee." Beatrice heard the pattern close. Sir Felix had not merely accused her. He had removed the Duke first, then arranged the room around her absence of protection. The cruelty of it was almost admirable in its efficiency. Almost. "So," Mrs. Vale Cresswell whispered, "the poor girl was cornered." Beatrice looked at her. The pity in the woman's face was not unkind, but Beatrice was suddenly tired of being understood only after injury. "I was accused," she said. not cornered. The correction steadied the room. It steadied her more. The Duke's gaze rested on her with unmistakable respect. Miss Ellowes is correct. She answered before I arrived. Mr. Pritchard gathered the papers. With your permission, copies of these findings will be lodged and sent to the trustees. You have it, the Duke said. Then he turned fully to Beatrice. There remains the matter of our arrangement. The room became very quiet. Lady Winifred watched him as if prepared to strike him socially with her fan if he chose the wrong word. Beatrice did not sit. Neither did he. You owe me no continuation, he said. Lord Penmere's will gave you an opportunity, not an obligation. My error may have made that opportunity feel unsafe. If you wish to end the courtship, I will state publicly that the decision was yours, honourable, and final. I will also continue to assist Mr. Pritchard in the matter of your mother's property, if you allow it. Beatrice had expected many things from men in power. Pressure. Explanation. Possessive apology. A softened command disguised as concern. She had not expected space. It opened before her now, and she found it frightening. When one had lived too long inside other people's decisions, freedom did not feel like wings at first. It felt like the floor had vanished. And if I continue? She asked. His answer came slowly. Then I will remember that standing beside you requires more than shielding you after harm is done. No one spoke. Beatrice looked at the forged letter on the table. Then at the ledger. Then at the Duke, who was feared because society mistook restraint for cruelty and perhaps because he had allowed them to. She did not forgive him entirely. She did not trust him easily. But for the first time since the will had been read, he was not asking her to be grateful for protection. He was asking whether she permitted his presence. I will continue the inquiry into my mother, she said. I will continue to appear where my absence would be made into guilt. I will not continue because of the will. I will not continue because of you. His face did not close. If anything, it became more attentive. Then why? Because truth is not less mine when others make it dangerous. Lady Winifred's eyes shone, though she would have denied it under oath. The Duke bowed his head. Then I will follow your lead where it is yours to give. Later that evening, after Beatrice had returned to Brook Street and the first corrected notes had begun their careful journey through London, a maid brought a folded scrap to Lady Winifred's back parlour. A boy left it at the kitchen entrance. My lady said it was for Miss Ellowes and no one else. Inside the paper lay half a ribbon, faded blue and cut sharply through the middle. Beatrice recognized it before she understood why. It matched the severed ribbon found in her mother's cabinet beneath the east stair. Around it, in a cramped hand, someone had written only 5 words. Mrs. Barlow knows where it went. The faded blue ribbon did not look powerful enough to summon anyone back into danger, yet by 10 o'clock the next morning it had done precisely that. Beatrice sat in Lady Winifred's back parlour with the ribbon laid beside the brass key and the torn half of her mother's letter, 3 fragments of a life that had been hidden so carefully that even their incompleteness felt deliberate. Mrs. Barlow knows where it went. The 5 words had been written by someone with an unsteady hand, perhaps a servant, perhaps someone old enough to fear both God and Lady Honoria Branton. Lady Winifred read the note for the 3rd time and then folded it. We go in daylight, she said. With witnesses, Beatrice added. With his grace? Lady Winifred asked, too casually. Beatrice looked at the ribbon instead of answering at once. The Duke had corrected his mistake before witnesses. He had given her space. He had said he would follow her lead where it was hers to give. That meant the next step could not be his command, nor his rescue. We inform him, she said. We do not wait for him to decide. Lady Winifred's mouth curved. Excellent. You are becoming inconvenient in all the proper ways. By noon, the party assembled before Penmere House again. Beatrice arrived with Lady Winifred, Mr. Pritchard, his clerk, and the Duke of Harrow-mere, who had come not in his own carriage but behind theirs, as if even his arrival had been arranged to make clear whose errand this was. He bowed to Beatrice on the pavement, his eyes going briefly to the pocket where she carried the key. Miss Ellowes. Your Grace. I understand Mrs. Barlow is to be questioned. Asked, Beatrice said. Not questioned. His gaze held hers, and the smallest acknowledgement passed through it. Asked, then. Sir Felix met them in the hall with a face made of polished displeasure. Again? Until truth grows tired of hiding, Lady Winifred said, handing her gloves to a footman as if she had been invited to tea. Lady Honoria appeared at the foot of the stair, dressed in dark violet, her hair arranged without a strand of disorder. This is becoming persecution. Beatrice looked at her steadily. Then you will be relieved when it ends. Celeste stood behind her mother, pale and silent. Her eyes fell on the ribbon in Beatrice's hand, and she looked away too quickly. Mr. Pritchard noticed. So did the Duke. Neither spoke. That silence, unlike the one that had wounded Beatrice days before, did not abandon her. It sharpened the room around her. Mrs. Barlow was summoned from below stairs. The housekeeper came with her keys at her waist and her cap perfectly straight, but her hands looked older than they had in the east stair room. She stopped when she saw the blue ribbon. For a moment, the years slipped from her face and left only grief. Beatrice stepped forward before Sir Felix could speak. Mrs. Barlow, I am not here to accuse you. I am here to ask what happened to my mother's papers. Mrs. Barlow's eyes filled, though no tears fell. Servants in great houses learn to keep even sorrow quiet. Miss Beatrice, I was told it was not my place. Lady Honoria's voice cut across the hall. Take care, Mrs. Barlow. Sentiment has ruined many dependable servants. The Duke turned his head. Threats have ruined more. Mrs. Barlow swallowed. Beatrice kept her voice gentle, but not pleading. Did Lady Honoria remove a packet from the room beneath the east stair after Lord Penmere died? The housekeeper's gaze flicked once toward Lady Honoria, then down. Yes, miss. The word struck the hall harder than a shout. Celeste drew a breath. Sir Felix said, absurd. Mrs. Barlow's chin trembled. I saw her ladyship take it. Blue ribbon around it, cut on one side because the knot had swelled with age. It was Miss Eleanor's writing on the top paper. I knew the hand. Beatrice could not speak for 1 second. The Duke did not step in. He looked at her, waiting. Leaving the question to her. Where did it go? She asked. Mrs. Barlow looked toward the old study at the rear of the house. His lordship's desk. The one with the false drawer. Lady Honoria said she would burn confusion before it bred scandal. Lady Honoria laughed softly. A servant's memory is a flexible thing when influenced by a lady seeking advancement. Mrs. Barlow straightened. I have served this house for 32 years, my lady. I have lied for it more times than I can count. I am too old to lie for it again. Mr. Pritchard's clerk wrote rapidly. Sir Felix moved toward the study door. This farce ends now. The Duke's voice stopped him. It ends after the desk is opened. You have no right. Beatrice took the brass key from her pocket. Lord Penmere's memorandum named my key, my mother's room, and concealment. If there is nothing there, you lose nothing by witnesses. Sir Felix's eyes were hard. You enjoy this? No, she said. I endured enough to know the difference. They entered the study together, though it was Beatrice who crossed first to the desk. It was a heavy walnut piece, too large for the room, with clawed feet and brass handles dulled by age. She remembered Lord Penmere sitting behind it, tapping papers into order, asking her once whether she formed her capital H with vanity or carelessness. She had hated him then for the correction. Now she wondered how many things he had hidden inside criticism because regret had made him clumsy. Mrs. Barlow pointed to the lower right drawer. It sticks if pulled straight. Press beneath. Beatrice knelt, feeling beneath the lip of the drawer until her fingers found a shallow notch. The drawer released with a tired wooden sigh. Inside lay old receipts, a cracked seal, and ashes in a small porcelain dish. Burned papers. Lady Honoria's face remained composed, but Celeste's composure failed by inches. Nothing, Sir Felix said. There. Are you satisfied? Beatrice stared at the ashes. For one dreadful moment, she thought the truth had been brought to the edge of rescue only to be turned into dust years ago. The Duke spoke quietly from behind her. False drawers often hide more than one falsehood. Beatrice looked back. He did not come closer. He only nodded toward the brass fittings. She turned the key in her palm and saw it then. A small keyhole tucked beneath the upper rail, nearly invisible in shadow. Not the drawer. The frame. Her hand did not tremble as she fitted the brass key into the lock. It resisted, then yielded. A narrow compartment clicked open from the side. Within it lay a folded paper wrapped in oilcloth, sealed twice, and tied with the other half of the blue ribbon. Beatrice heard Mrs. Barlow whisper, "Thank God." Mr. Pritchard moved nearer. "Miss Ellowes, may I?" Beatrice held the packet for one breath longer because some part of her needed to feel that it had reached her hand first. Then she gave it to him. He opened it before witnesses. The paper inside was a codicil, written in Lord Penmere's hand and witnessed properly. Mr. Pritchard read with increasing gravity. Eleanor Ellowes had brought into Penmere protection a private settlement from Beatrice's father's family, small by ducal measure, but enough to provide independence. After Eleanor's death, Lady Honoria had represented portions of it as household debt. Sir Felix, then not yet of age but later active in the accounts, had benefited from those misdirections. If concealment were ever established, the disputed reserve was to be removed from Branton management, and Beatrice Eleanor Ellowes was to receive settlement protection under trustees not connected to Penmere House. Beatrice listened until one sentence broke through all the rest. "My failure toward Eleanor's child cannot be undone, but it may yet be prevented from becoming inheritance." She closed her eyes. Lord Penmere had not been kind enough in life. He had not been brave soon enough. But he had known. He had known she was not charity. Lady Honoria spoke first. "This proves nothing but an old man's guilt." "No," Mr. Pritchard said. "It proves an old man's instruction. The accounts will determine the rest." Sir Felix's voice was low. "Those papers will not stand." The Duke stepped forward then, not in front of Beatrice, but beside her. "Copies will be lodged today. With Mr. Pritchard, with the trustees, and at Harrow-mere House." Beatrice looked at him. Harrow-mere. His expression darkened with old memory. "Lord Penmere sent a duplicate there. My secretary found reference to it last night in my father's papers. I did not understand what it meant until now. Why would he send it to your house?" The Duke's answer was quiet enough that only the nearest heard. "Because my house owed your mother a debt of honor." The word settled between them, heavier than apology, more dangerous than affection. Beatrice turned back to the codicil. Her fingers touched the edge of the blue ribbon. "Mamma did not leave me nothing. It was not proper grammar. It was not elegant. It was the child inside her speaking before the woman could arrange the sentence. No one corrected her. Not even the ghosts of Penmere House." Lady Honoria's face had gone pale beneath its powder. Celeste looked close to tears, but Beatrice could not tell whether they were fear, shame, or fury. Sir Felix gave one last bow, all sharp edges. "If you intend to make a public disgrace of this family, Mother, we had best ensure proper witnesses hear the full extent of Miss Ellowes's delusion. Tonight." In the drawing-room. Lady Honoria's eyes lifted. Her composure returned like a curtain falling. "Yes," she said softly. "A family council. Let the matter end where it began." The Duke looked to Beatrice, waiting again. Not commanding. Beatrice folded the ribbon around the codicil and held it steady. "Then we shall bring the truth back to the room that first demanded my answer." By candlelight, Penmere House looked almost innocent. The drawing-room had been restored to its earlier arrangement, the same chairs before the hearth, the same black mourning ribbons at the mirrors, the same polished table where Beatrice had first placed the brass key before people who believed she could be made small by being watched. Yet the room was fuller now. Lady Honoria had been careful. She had summoned relatives, 2 severe matrons with influence over invitations, Mrs. Vale Cresswell, Lord Davenley, Mr. Pritchard, and a grey-haired gentleman connected to the county bench who looked as if he considered emotion an inferior form of evidence. Sir Felix stood near the mantel, exactly where he had stood the day the will was read. Celeste sat beside her mother, pale and beautiful, with her hands folded so tightly that the knuckles showed through her gloves. Beatrice entered with Lady Winifred on one side and the Duke of Harrow-mere on the other, though he did not take her arm. That mattered. He had offered. She had declined. She needed to cross this room by her own strength. His presence beside her was not a crutch. It was a witness. The brass key lay in her pocket, the codicil wrapped and sealed in Mr. Pritchard's case, and the torn half of Eleanor's letter rested beneath Beatrice's glove, close enough that she felt its edge whenever her courage wavered. Lady Honoria rose with exquisite sorrow. How tragic that we must gather in this manner. I had hoped Miss Ellowes might accept private correction before public embarrassment became unavoidable. Beatrice looked at her. So had I. A small silence followed. Lady Honoria did not like being answered without heat. Sir Felix bowed toward the witnesses. Let us be direct. Miss Ellowes has produced a key no one can authenticate, a torn scrap no one can complete, and now a codicil conveniently discovered in a desk she had every motive to search. She has also enjoyed the protection of His Grace, whose generosity may have been engaged before his judgment. The Duke's face did not move, but the room felt the temperature of his attention alter. Sir Felix continued, too committed now to retreat. This family has been maligned. My mother has been accused by implication. My sister has been dragged through whispers. All because a dependent woman saw a chance to rise above her station by attaching herself to the most powerful man in the room. Lady Winifred's fan opened. That sentence has done more to expose you than any evidence could. Beatrice did not smile. She looked at Mr. Pritchard. Please read the codicil in full. Lady Honoria's voice sharpened. There is no need for theatrical reading. There is every need, Beatrice said. For years, selected sentences have been used to make my mother shameful and me grateful. Tonight, nothing will be selected. Mr. Pritchard broke the outer tape and read. His voice was steady, but the words made the room less steady with every line. Eleanor Ellowes had brought a private settlement into Lord Penmere's protection. It had not been household charity. It had not been debt. After Eleanor's death, portions of it had been absorbed into accounts overseen first by Lady Honoria's influence and later by Sir Felix's management. Lord Penmere confessed failure, cowardice, and delay. He named trustees. He named Beatrice. He named the East Stair room. He named the key. Lady Honoria sat as if carved from ice. Sir Felix's face had gone dark with contained fury. When Mr. Pritchard reached the sentence about preventing failure from becoming inheritance, Beatrice felt something inside her loosen. Not joy. Justice had weight before it had comfort. Old guilt, Lady Honoria said when the reading ended. Nothing more. My uncle was ill. He invented crimes to ease his conscience. The Duke stepped forward then and placed a second small packet on the table. Lord Penmere sent a duplicate to Harrow-mere Abbey. It was found in my father's strongbox, behind a lock worked by the same maker as Miss Ellowes's key. Beatrice took the brass key from her pocket and set it beside the packet. The two objects did not gleam. They did not need to. The grey-haired county gentleman leaned forward. You can attest to that, Your Grace. I can. So can my steward and secretary. Mr. Pritchard has copies. Sir Felix gave a hard laugh. How convenient that His Grace's house now supplies what Miss Ellowes lacks. The Duke turned to him. My house supplies what it should have supplied years ago. Truth. He opened the packet and handed Mr. Pritchard a folded letter. Read it. This time, the solicitor's voice lowered. The letter was Eleanor's. Not a fragment. Not a scrap. Whole. She wrote of trusting Lord Penmere because she had no husband to speak for her, of fear that Lady Honoria resented her presence, of accounts being altered, of a daughter who must never be told she existed by charity. Beatrice stood motionless. The room blurred, then sharpened again. Her mother had not been a whisper. Her mother had fought in ink when no one would hear her aloud. Celeste made a small sound. Lady Honoria turned on her. Be still. The words were too sharp, too familiar. The Duke noticed. Beatrice noticed more. Mr. Pritchard laid another sheet beside the forged letter. There remains the matter of the accusation against Miss Ellowes. The removed ledger page, the ink impression, and the phrase used in the forged letter indicate access from inside Penmere House. Lord Davenly adjusted his spectacles. Miss Branton, I believe you were near enough at Mrs. Vale Cresswell's assembly to hear Mr. Crewe use similar language. Celeste's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Lady Honoria said, My daughter is not on trial. Beatrice looked at Celeste, and the anger she expected did not come. What she felt was sadder. No. She was used to make one. Celeste's eyes filled. Mamma said it would only frighten you into leaving. I didn't think it would go so far. Sir Felix swore under his breath, too low for the matrons, but not too low for the Duke. Lady Honoria rose. Silence, Celeste. No, Beatrice said. The word was not loud, but it stopped the room. There has been enough silence in this house. Celeste began to cry quietly then, not prettily, not theatrically. Lady Honoria remained standing, stripped of softness by her own fury. Mr. Pritchard gathered the papers. The trustees will be notified tonight. Sir Felix Branton's management of the disputed reserve will be suspended pending review. Lady Honoria's involvement in the accounts will be entered into the record. Further proceedings will follow through proper channels. Mrs. Vale Cresswell looked away from Lady Honoria, and that small movement did what legal words could not. Social ruin began not with a shout, but with the first person refusing to meet one's eye. The county gentleman stood. I shall not pretend this is a private misunderstanding. Lady Honoria's face went white. Sir Felix looked at Beatrice with open hatred now, but hatred no longer had command of the room. The Duke stepped toward Beatrice, then stopped at a respectful distance. Before all present, he said, I must add one truth that does not concern the papers. When Miss Ellowes was accused, I allowed caution to stand where belief was required. My silence harmed her? I will not let rank disguise that failure. Beatrice turned to him slowly. No one breathed. He looked not like a feared duke then, but like a man who understood that power without humility was only another locked room. I cannot undo it, he said. I can only refuse to repeat it. Lady Honoria gave a bitter laugh. How touching. Will there be a proposal now, to complete the performance? Beatrice looked back at her. No performance remains to be completed by you. Then she faced the Duke. I will not accept a marriage as shelter from scandal. I will not become grateful enough to forget that I was wronged. I will not be rescued into another form of dependence. I know, he said. If this continues, Your Grace, it continues because you can stand beside me when I no longer need saving. The Duke's eyes held hers, steady and grave. Then I ask not for your dependence, Miss Ellowes. I ask for your choice. The room that had once weighed her against a roof and a purse heard the words and could not alter them. Beatrice felt her mother's letter beneath her glove, the key on the table, and the eyes of every person who had expected her to shrink. She did not. Then, Your Grace, she said, I choose to continue, not because the will commands it, but because you finally asked. The Duke bowed his head, and when he lifted the brass key, he did not keep it. He placed it back into her palm before them all. Then let us go home only when you decide where home is. 3 weeks after the drawing-room at Penmere House finally answered for itself, London did what London always did when truth became undeniable. It changed its tone and pretended the melody had been gracious all along. The same ladies who had wondered whether Beatrice Ellowes had forged a mother for the sake of a duke now sent cards to Brook Street with careful phrases about admiration, fortitude, and the difficulty of knowing what to believe in such distressing circumstances. Lady Winifred read them aloud in the mornings with the merciless pleasure of a magistrate passing sentence. Lady Markham says she always suspected there was more dignity in you than society understood, she announced over tea. How generous of her to admire what she tried not to invite. Beatrice smiled, not because the cards pleased her, but because they no longer had power to wound her. That was new. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter and stronger. The trustees had moved faster than anyone expected once the county gentleman and Lord Davenly put their names to the account of that final evening. Sir Felix was removed from management of the disputed reserve within a week, and Mr. Pritchard began the formal review of the Penmere accounts with a thoroughness that made even Lady Winifred call him almost handsome in usefulness. Sir Felix remained in London long enough to discover that clubs could be chilly without being empty. Men who once praised his prospects now remembered urgent appointments when he approached. Lady Honoria retreated first behind illness, then behind silence, and finally to a rented house near Bath, where she could call exile economy and pretend the invitations had stopped because she had chosen quiet. Celeste was sent to live with a cautious aunt who believed repentance and plain gowns improved young ladies in roughly equal measure. Beatrice did not rejoice in any of it. Punishment, she discovered, did not taste sweet. It tasted clean. The bitterness had belonged to waiting for it. She remained at Lady Winifred's house during the first weeks of her renewed courtship with the Duke of Harrow-mere, and every visit was conducted with such proper care that even London could not make impropriety from it without doing visible labour. He came in the afternoon, never too late. He sent notes through servants, never by hidden hand. He asked before arranging, explained before acting, and accepted refusal without that faint masculine surprise Beatrice had learned to dread. That, more than flowers or compliments, began to alter the shape of him in her mind. He was still severe. He still frightened careless people by listening too well. Yet he no longer seemed like a locked door. He seemed like a door built heavy because too much had once tried to break through it. On the 22nd day after the confrontation, he asked whether she would come to Harrow-mere Abbey in Yorkshire to see the Strongbacks where Eleanor's letter had been kept. Lady Winifred would accompany her, of course. Mr. Pritchard had business with the steward there. The visit would be announced, proper, and brief. Beatrice accepted, though she did not tell him how her heart moved at the word Abbey. She had been offered roofs before. Some had been cages. She no longer trusted shelter until she had seen where the keys were kept. Harrow-mere Abbey stood beyond a sweep of moor and winter-browned grass, its grey stone rising against a wide northern sky. It was not gentle. It had towers without frivolity, windows set deep into old walls, and a drive nearly half a mile long that made each turn of the wheels feel like a decision. Yet smoke rose from the chimneys, and when Beatrice stepped down from Lady Winifred's carriage, the front door opened not upon cold grandeur, but upon ordered warmth. The steward bowed. The housekeeper welcomed Lady Winifred by name. No one looked at Beatrice as if she were an accident. The Duke stood inside the hall, bareheaded, his expression controlled but not distant. "Miss Ellowes," he said. "Welcome to Harrow-mere." Beatrice looked past him to the staircase, the dark portraits, the flagged floor that had outlived generations of Veynes who had perhaps done honour poorly and pried very well. "Thank you, Your Grace." Lady Winifred removed her gloves. "If this house contains any more secret compartments, I insist upon being seated before they are opened." The Duke's mouth softened. "I shall try to limit the architecture's confessions." He led them first to his father's study, where the Strongbacks sat upon a table, open now and empty of secrets. Beatrice touched the edge of the iron lid. It was strange to feel no tremor. Eleanor's letter had already been copied, lodged, and folded safely among Beatrice's own papers. The box no longer held her mother hostage. It was only metal. "I hated this room as a boy," the Duke said quietly. Lady Winifred had crossed to speak with the housekeeper near the door, close enough for propriety, far enough for mercy. Beatrice looked at him. "Because of your father." "Because I believed every judgment spoken here. My father sounded certain, and certainty is persuasive to children." "And now?" "Now I know certainty is sometimes only fear wearing a louder coat." Beatrice rested her hand on the table. "My mother was afraid too." "Yes. But she wrote anyway." His gaze held hers. "So do you?" After luncheon, he asked if she would see one more room. They crossed a passage at the rear of the house, where the windows looked toward the moor and the light came in clean and pale. The room he opened was neither grand nor ceremonial. It had a broad writing desk, shelves waiting for ledgers, a cabinet for papers, and a view of the estate road where tenants' carts moved like dark stitches across the distance. Fresh sealing wax lay beside an inkstand. A small fire burned in the grate. Beatrice stopped at the threshold. "What is this?" "It was once the estate correspondence room. It has been unused since my mother's death." He did not step in before her. "I thought it might suit the work you spoke of." "What work?" she asked, though she knew. He drew a folded paper from the desk and placed it where she could read it if she chose. "Your mother's recovered settlement will be placed under trustees as directed. Nothing requires you to use it for anyone but yourself." But you mentioned, at Lady Winifred's table, that women in reduced circumstances are often trained to be decorative when what they need is competence. Letters. Accounts. Household management. The ability to read what men prefer they sign unread. Beatrice looked at the desk. Her throat tightened. You remember that? I remember most things you say. It was not said as flattery. That made it harder to dismiss. This is not a gift meant to persuade you, he added. It is a room. You may use it, refuse it, alter it, or lock it and never think of it again. Beatrice walked to the desk. Upon it lay a new key, bright and well cut, but beside it was an empty space. She understood before he spoke. I thought, he said, that your old key should not be replaced. She drew the small brass key from her reticule. It looked humbler than ever against the polished wood. Worn, uneven, stubborn. Like survival. She placed it beside the sealing wax. For years, she had hidden it in gloves, pockets, reticules, and clenched fists. Now it lay openly in a room no one asked her to leave. The Duke stood near the door, giving her the dignity of distance. Alistair, she said. His name changed the air. He went very still. Yes? I will marry you. He did not move toward her. That was how she knew she had chosen well. He understood that even joy must not rush a woman who had fought to stand freely. Because you wish to, he asked. Beatrice smiled then, fully, with tears close enough to shine and far enough not to fall. Because I wish to. Because you asked, not commanded. Because when the truth left me with nothing to prove, I still wanted to turn and find you there. His breath left him slowly. Beatrice, I don't know if I can make gentleness look easy. I don't require easy. She touched the old key. Only honest. He crossed the room then, stopping before her, and offered his hand as he had at the assembly, formal enough for the world, careful enough for her heart. She placed her hand in his. Lady Winifred, who had certainly been near enough to hear what mattered and far enough to deny it, called from the corridor, I hope no one is making life decisions without tea. Beatrice laughed. The sound surprised her. It belonged in the room at once. Later, when the first letters were written from the new desk, one went to Mr. Pritchard about the settlement fund, one to Lady Winifred asking her to serve as patroness, and one, in Beatrice's own hand, to a quiet young woman whose family had fallen into debt and who needed employment that did not require humiliation as its price. Beatrice signed each page clearly. Beatrice Ellowes. Soon enough, another name would join it. Not erase it. Join it. As dusk settled over Harrow-mere Abbey, the brass key lay no longer hidden in her glove, but openly beside the sealing wax and the letters signed in her own name. The will had brought her to his door. She had opened it herself.